Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Embraced a Quiet Life? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The first time Aich died was when I was 4 years old. If I had to be technical, my first death was actually in my past life. I only counted that somewhat since I managed to somehow keep my memories into my next life. Yet since it had nothing to do with the mechanics of my quirk, I've only officially died a total of 3 times. My quirk was regeneration. Not a regeneration quirk, but regeneration with a capital R. Instead of giving me a powerful healing factor, the potency of my quirk was scaled on the levels of resurrection instead. Death was no longer a problem for me since I could heal from almost anything, but there was a reason why I called it regeneration instead. The name was a nod to a famous science fiction show in my past life, even if I wasn't a Time Lord from Gallifrey Star. For those of you unaware, the titular character of the show was an alien with the biological ability to undergo a transformation into a new physical form and personality after a normally fatal incident. Basically, I was immortal. Nevertheless, my quirk didn't change the fact that death was still a permanent loss of life. The only difference between others and myself was that a replacement would take the place of the person who died. I was living proof of that, a byproduct of those that lived before me. 0. Couldn't recall how he died. 1. Died in a hit and run. 2. Was murdered by a villain. 3. Died with a knife stuck through her chest. If you really thought about it, that technically made me only a few months old. That was approximately how long ago my predecessor died and my quirk activated to save us. I kept the name I was born with, but I wasn't the person my mother gave birth to. 1. Was a child that no longer existed, save for a few photos that my parents sometimes showed me. Staring at the face of my predecessor, I had mixed feelings even if we were technically the same person. After going through such traumatic events all throughout my lives, I understood far better than anybody else how painful death could be. Not just the physical sensations, but how it affected those around you. And more than anyone else, I was aware of the fragility of life. I personally conducted my own funeral a few days after 3's passing. Only my parents and her friends decided to attend, but my memories of that day were vague at best. What probably hurt the most was that the picture we had of me at the time was that of her with a beaming smile. A smile that told others how much she enjoyed living life to the fullest. The fact that despite being born in a first-world country, I managed to experience death multiple times told me how much our current society was deteriorating. I couldn't place my faith in heroes anymore after everything I've been through. Neither could I understand those my age who dreamed of becoming heroes. Why couldn't anyone else understand that death was always lurking around the corner? That life was simply a continuous roll of fortunate probability, and that simply being unlucky could mean the end of everything you ever held dear. But my parents made sure to impose certain values on me. If life could be snuffed in an instant, then it was best to enjoy life to the fullest no matter what. So I tried my best. Despite the rumors that surrounded me during the last few months of middle school, I made sure to keep in contact with hurt friends. I wasn't 3, not really. But at our core, we still wanted to keep hold of the bonds we made in our lives. I made sure to live. I made sure to smile. If not for me, then for her. The girl that lost her life all those months ago. Yet despite that, I couldn't do the one thing she truly wanted. I couldn't share the same dreams and motivations she did, despite being the same person. I couldn't live with the idea of becoming a hero for her. Yet I didn't want her dream to die with me either. So without really thinking about it, I applied to the same school she wanted to when she was still alive. But I compromised and applied for general studies instead of the hero course. I wouldn't be a hero for her, but I would watch out for the heroes that she wished to one day meet. Nice to meet you. My name is Hatsu Ijima ***. I practiced my introduction in front of the mirror, channeling the same extrovert energy that 3 once had. The smile on my face slowly turned awkward as I continued to observe myself until I turned away in embarrassment with a bright blush on my face. Still, I tried again. Oh. The name's Hatsu Ijima. Hey there, I'm Hatsu Ijima. How's it going? I'm Hatsu Ijima, and my dream is to become the Hokage. By the time my mom called me for breakfast, I was a ball of shame rolling around on the floor. Leaving the house, I checked my phone to make sure that I would make it to school on time. Finishing my meal only took a few minutes, but dealing with both my parents fretting over me held me back another dozen minutes. The two of them saw me off with a wave and smiles on their faces. Some days, I had trouble returning the smile back at them. I knew that they were simply making it up for when they couldn't do anything for my predecessors. The fact that they've technically lost 3 of their children to death must have been agonizing. But still, they somehow managed to put a smile on their faces whenever they talked to me. Why did such kind people end up with a child that had a quirk like mine? God must have been especially cruel the day they gave birth to me. Entering the school gates, I took the time to gaze up at the large and eye-catching buildings. Even Zero, in our previous life, never went to a school this fancy, and he went to a reputable university. I entered Class 1C. Since I was cutting it close, the room was already filled with a lot of students. I didn't recognize anybody, which made sense since nobody from my middle school had applied to UHei as far as I was aware. Still, I assumed that I would at least meet a certain purple-haired character today. Maybe Shinso was just late? Either way, I made my way towards a seat and sat down. Soon, the rest of the class began to fill up. And only when everyone else was here did the person I was looking for finally appear. Almost running, Shinso made it through the door and sped past me before I could get a look. Right as I was about to turn around, the teacher entered the room and called for our attention. With no other choice, I focused on paying attention instead. And if that's everything, time for the school entrance ceremony. Everyone come with me and line up in an orderly fashion. It should only take a little while, and then afterward we can introduce ourselves. Somehow, I completely blanked during the entire ceremony. Compared to my previous incarnations, I was a bit more absent-minded than they were. By the time I brought my focus back to reality, we were already being dismissed back to our classes. All right, everyone, the homeroom teacher called out. Let's go over introductions, starting with the front row. This was when my nerves acted out. I knew that this was going to happen, and I wanted to make a good impression on my classmates. But as several students introduced themselves, I realized that most of them also gave out what kind of quirk they had along with their names and hobbies. That caused a minor dilemma for me. Should I reveal what my quirk was? In 3's case, she decided to be honest despite the insensitive questions her classmates asked her afterward. I didn't know if I was ready for that yet, but neither did I want to keep my quirk a secret. Usually, the secret would reveal itself eventually. It was pretty rare for somebody to never have heard of the child disliked by the Shinigami. Unfortunately, there was plenty of news regarding me due to my past incidents. Having a pseudo-immortality quirk meant that I had something of a reputation, even if only a minor one. Already, it was my turn to speak. My name is Hatsu Ijima, I said. My hobbies are reading and playing video games. My quirk is regeneration. Technically, it was a lot more complicated than that. But to my classmates, they would simply just assume that I had a healing factor or something. I made sure to pay particular attention once Shinso stood up. Hitoshi Shinso. I like cats and enjoy bicycling. My quirk is brainwashing. How honest. Shinso ignored the dumbfounded looks on his classmates' faces and sat back down. Meanwhile, I just continued to stare at the clock to see how long it was until lunch. Despite being born several centuries into an alternate future world with superpowers, school was still pretty much the same as it was in his previous life. Waking up early, I made my way to school. While walking, I recalled with mirth that Zero used to have a habit of setting up multiple alarm clocks to wake him up in quick succession. Since the first alarm was never enough to wake him up fully, the alarms that rang afterward were supposed to annoy him enough to frustrate him out of bed and to go on with his day. For some reason, every other version except me inherited that same hatred for mornings. I was the only exception, with my normal routine starting at a healthy 7 o'clock every morning. It was the small differences between myself and my previous incarnations that made me aware that we really were different people. While some of our core values remained consistent, it was fun to discover how much we differed from the others. A small sort of pride in knowing that each version of ourselves was unique in our own way. Today was the second day of the term, and I was getting used to the way classes were being taught here after yesterday. While the entrance ceremony took place during the weekend, Monday was spent actually teaching us the various subjects normally found in a regular high school. Already, I heard about the battle trials that occurred yesterday. Apparently, the Gen Ed students like to gossip about the Hero Corps students during their free time. While I didn't make any friends, I managed to at least insert myself in their discussions of trivial school matters. At the very least, I could consider a small portion of my classmates as friendly acquaintances, though it would probably help if I could at least remember their names. To be fair, the only person I know by name in my class is Shinso, and that's mostly because of Zero's influence. It normally takes me at least a few weeks to completely memorize someone's full name. Heading towards the school gates, I noticed a crowd of news reporters blocking the way. A few of them managed to catch students by surprise, questioning them about how All Might was as a teacher. They especially targeted those from the heroics course, noticeably apparent by the number of buttons on the uniform jacket shoulders. What kind of lessons does All Might teach? How is All Might as a teacher? When does All Might teach you? And what class? Since I had 2 buttons on my shoulders, differing from the heroic course students with 1 button on theirs, I was allowed through without any trouble. Now that I thought about it, wasn't there going to be some sort of intruder incident later today? I feel like that is something I should take care of, but it's not like I have a good enough excuse as to why I would know ahead of time that something would happen. You learned ahead of time that somebody would break into the school? How would you know that? Yeah, no easy way to explain it. Then again, the consequences of doing nothing are pretty dangerous. If I recall right, the villains that will invade today will somehow acquire the schedule for All Might's participation in Class 1A's rescue training session tomorrow. Doing nothing means allowing those villains to acquire that information and plan to attack Class 1A. It's a bit late to do anything about the intrusion today. But what about planning for the attack tomorrow? I could send an anonymous message saying that I'm a minor criminal trying to warn them about the League of Villains plan. Alright, that's what I'll do then. PE was something I was looking forward to. Changing into my gym uniform, a classmate spoke up after seeing what I was wearing underneath my clothes. What's with the vest? I slipped the top part of the uniform over me. It's a weighted vest I keep on throughout the academic portion of my day. Helps with exercising and is especially effective during workouts. Is it heavy? Not really, it's not even a dozen kilograms star dot. One of the weird perks of regeneration was that despite the seemingly random changes in my physical form, my fitness levels were usually in peak condition compared to the norm. Not exactly superhuman, but comparable to a fit quirkless person at best. Training helped build muscle and improve my fitness, which is why 3 bought the vest in the first place. Although, she didn't exactly get the chance to use it since she bought it just a bit before we regenerated. Since my body figure didn't change much afterward, with me maintaining my lithe form still, there was no reason to throw it out. So I ended up using it throughout most of middle school. Exiting the classroom, the rest of the students gathered in the field. Did everyone receive a paper? The teacher called out. Since we're conducting your physical exams today, make sure to write down everything properly. Just like in the series, the general education students would also conduct the same exercises as the heroic students. The only difference was that we would still be limited in our usage of quirks. For the sprinting portion, can I have one of the boys take down the times? Seeing nobody raising their hand, I shrugged and volunteered myself. The teacher nodded as he saw me do so. Okay, boys will go up first. Meanwhile, the girls can start lining up for the standing long jump. Watching everyone doing the 50-meter dash, I noted with some curiosity that about a fifth of the class was either as fast or was faster than my middle school times. Since a few of them had advantages like mutation or biological quirks, that meant that I was most likely above average compared to the rest of my classmates in fitness. Then again, one could argue that regeneration helped give me an advantage by blessing me with a body that could easily improve. I only wished that it instead helped in the brain compartment compared to having better running times. I blinked as I realized that everyone was almost done, which meant that it was almost my turn to run. Looking around, I found that the nearest person to me was Shinso. Walking up to him, I tapped him on the shoulder from behind. "Excuse me." Huh. He turned around. Yikes, his eyes really gave the impression of a guy who desperately needed his sleep. The heavy bags and half-closed expression combo almost made me sweat in nervousness. "I saw you run already. Is it okay if you take my place for the last portion so that I can write down my time?" His eyes narrowed. "And why did you pick me?" I blinked. "'Cause you were nearby?" For some reason, I felt that my answer annoyed him. "Fine." He gestured for the timer in my hand, and I obliged. Seriously, I didn't know what was his problem, but I decided to ignore it for now and get ready to run. Several seconds later, I heard him call out my time and I quickly wrote it down. Little under 7 seconds. Walking back to him, I gave him my thanks. "Whatever," he replied. After saying that, he moved away to somewhere else. Seeing that we were done, the teacher called for the boys and girls to switch. After my turn, I checked my result with the national average and saw that it was pretty good in comparison. Although, maybe it was because the class had more quirks that helped with arm strength. Because I noted that I wasn't even in the top 10 distances compared to everyone else. As the rest of the exercises continued, we were eventually told to move into the gyms so that we could do the rest of the physical exam there. While stretching to keep me limber, Shin-So suddenly approached me. "Hey, can you help hold my legs down for the sit-ups?" "Huh." I blinked in surprise. "No problem at all. Thanks. You can go first, and we can switch once you're done." I was lucky that the vest I had on didn't hinder me too much when I moved. As Shin-So watched me perform the exercise, his eyes widened after I went past the 3-digit mark. "Almost done." "Why, I huffed. "What's the call?" 113, he replied. "And you had a vest on?" "Oh, you overheard us earlier?" "Guess it's my turn." He avoided answering instead. His face looked like it was about to break out into a scowl. Watching him try his best after my go was almost sad. His face went red even as he struggled for 30, a fact that seemed to embarrass him if the red near the tip of his ears weren't an indication. "Hey, did you used to train to apply for the hero course in the past?" he asked me. That was a bit difficult to answer. But I didn't take the entrance exam since I decided to switch to general education in my 3rd year. Technically, it was 3 who trained to become a hero. Although, does regeneration take into account how much exercise a previous incarnation did when changing the physical form? How much influence does the previous level of fitness have on the next regeneration? That explains it. He didn't clarify what he meant by that, and Shin-So decided that we were done being partners. I spent the rest of the period confused as to what all that was about. The 3rd day of the term started off with a message informing all students that classes were canceled for the day. We were told through both text and email. The message only came to us an hour before normal school hours would begin. After reading it, a huge sense of relief washed over me. I knew immediately that this was related to the warning I sent yesterday. Setting up a simple system where automated emails would inform the heroes at UA about the attack wasn't too hard. Making sure to give enough details about the quirks that the Nomu and the villains I could recall was a bit harder since it has been a couple of years. I even made sure to specify that somebody other than All might handle the regenerating shock absorbant villain. Still, I couldn't go to sleep that night since my head was too busy worrying about whether or not I was going to be taken seriously. There was no guarantee that they would believe my message since I couldn't provide any hard proof that what I said was true. The only thing I could warn them about that might get me taken seriously was that I highlighted the fact that the Nomo had multiple quirks. Hopefully, either All Might or someone else in the know could figure out the significance of that bit. Though the strange thing was that there was no reason given as to why UA canceled classes for the day. Nothing on the news mentioned anything about an attack, and as far as I was aware, none of the students from Class 1A went to school. So if the attack still happened, there would not have been any students there anyway. Then again, this wasn't my problem anymore. I did my part, and somehow the results turned out fine. Since classes were canceled for the day, I decided to sleep in for the day to make up for last night. It wasn't until late afternoon that I received a call from someone that woke me up. "Hello? Hatsu." A loud feminine voice rang from the device, and I immediately regretted picking up the call. I stifled a yawn before answering. "What do you want, Yumi?" Look outside the window. The window? I blinked. Yumi, please tell me you aren't outside my house right now. Check for yourself. Curiosity forced me to obey her as I opened the blinds to my room and stared down from the second floor to see my friend standing next to the gates with a phone held to her head. I swore I saw stars in her eyes as my middle school friend waved merrily at me. I continued the conversation. Did you come here straight from school? Yup, she happily replied. Nobody answered when I rang the doorbell. Now, let me in so that I may manhandle you as I please. With that sentence, I'm tempted to leave you out by yourself. Either let me into the house or get your butt out here so that I can take my friend out to play. Do I have to? I'm not above breaking and entering if that's what it takes. Please don't. My mother is still under the delusion that you're actually a nice girl. I sighed. Give me 2 minutes and I'll come out. Try not to cause a commotion while you wait. Make me wait any longer and I'll start singing a mock compilation of your most embarrassing moments in middle school aloud for the street to hear. I hung up and immediately bolted for the closet. Glaring at her as I exited the house, she merely beamed at me as she hooked her arm around mine. I allowed myself to get dragged along with her as we began to leave the neighborhood. Where exactly are you taking me? There's this new cake shop that opened recently, and there's a promotion for free slices if you bring a friend. Gotta be honest, I'm not a big fan of cake. I know that. She rolled her eyes. You have a thing against the spongy part, you mentioned that a while back. Don't worry, they also sell cheesecake. That should be fine with you, right? Sure. So, how's the new school? Good, I replied. I made it into general studies. That's great. Still can't believe that someone I know made it into UA. It would be nice if I knew somebody from our old school though. So I'm guessing from that sentence that you haven't gotten close to anyone in your class yet? Hey, that's not true. Does that mean you've made a friend already? She nodded. Guess that's a no. If it makes you feel better, I'm treating you today, so just enjoy yourself. Didn't you say that the promotion was free? You're still getting free food in the end. Sitting with Yumi at a table outside the store, I poked my cheesecake with a fork. The thing about changing bodies every so often was that things like taste and sensation weren't always the same. It was always a struggle after each new regeneration to figure out my new likes and dislikes. The food that I used to like might not be the same after changing, and old allergies and dislikes could flip and become my new favorites. You gonna finish that or what? I'm taking my time, I replied. It's a bit sweet for my taste. All right, she nodded. Yumi leaned forward and rested her elbows on the table. By the way, I've been meaning to ask. What happened to all of your old clothes you used to wear when you were a girl? Most of them are in storage. Some of the more unisex ones I still wear. But the dresses and skirts are a little too much for the current me. You ever think you'll wear them again? I'm not in the habit of cross-dressing, I replied. And I'm fairly cisgender in this regeneration, so boy clothes are fine for now. Plus, there's no guarantee that my next regeneration will be a girl again. So my parents and I are thinking about donating them to charity since I'll probably outgrow them by the time it comes to that. Yumi frowned. Isn't it kinda morbid to think that you might regenerate again? That's basically saying that you expect to die in the future. With my track record, the odds are against me that I'll live past my teenage years. Hopefully, I'll at least be old enough to drink before that happens. I realized immediately that was the wrong thing to say. I quickly looked up and saw that Yumi wasn't in a happy mood anymore. See, can we please not talk about this? Her face showed how uncomfortable she was with the topic. I really don't like to think about you dying again so soon. I winced. Sorry, I wasn't thinking. She nodded, and the two of us sat in silence. Yumi Utsuka and I first met in junior high, back when I was still 3, and quite a different person compared to my current self. Mitsuyo Middle School * was quite far from where I lived, so there weren't a lot of people I knew from my elementary school who enrolled there. Things were different back then. Yumi wasn't as friendly as she was now, and I was fairly introverted back then as well. If it weren't for the fact that we were desk mates, the two of us probably would never have interacted in the first place. She was actually the first female friend I've ever made since most of my previous friends up to that point were guys. Even after the incident, she still made an attempt to rekindle our friendship after I regenerated. I would like to say that our friendship stayed the same, and I knew for certain that Yumi made an effort. But I wasn't the same person as the friend she grew to love, even if we were similar for the most part. Still, I counted her as someone I could trust at the very least. My fingers tapped the table. She still hasn't been caught yet? Do you think she's still interested in going after you? I don't think she knows what I look like now, I answered honestly. She didn't exactly stick around when the heroes came to rescue me, so she didn't see me regenerate into a new appearance. I'm hoping that even if she passes by me on the street, she won't recognize me as I am. Yumi bit her lip. I hate the fact that I'm not there with you even though she's still out there. Hey now, I gently grabbed her hand. Don't worry about me. My neighborhood is fairly safe and close to the local police station. Plus, I'm going to a school with dozens of heroes and students training to be heroes. Protection is the last thing I have to worry about. She gripped my hand. Are you still in contact with Eraserhead? I hesitated. I haven't exactly met with him since enrolling. I'm sure he's busy with a lot of things. What could be more important than making sure you aren't targeted by a crazy lunatic? The League of Villains for one, I thought in my head. Pretty sure that class is in more danger than I am. God knows those kids need the extra help and supervision compared to me. I didn't say that aloud though. Look, if it makes you feel better, I'll try to talk to him as soon as possible. If he's busy, maybe he can help me talk to someone in school who'll know what to do. Promise? Of course, I promised. Remember, I still want to reach the drinking age. I don't want to die before this body gets a taste of alcohol. She gave a weak smile. We can make it a day and go out for drinks together when the both of us are old enough. I'll look forward to it. Truly, I meant it when I said that. Despite knowing of the possible dangers that were about to happen, I wasn't planning on personally involving myself if I could help it. If I could live a long and peaceful life, that was my victory there. I didn't need to be greedy and ask for more. This was enough. The suspension of classes ended on Friday, and the students were finally allowed back to school. I was still somewhat suspicious over the lack of news on the villain's attack. There was no doubt that something happened, but why was there no information whatsoever being shared with the public? To think that such a small change from canon could cause such a difference. As expected, even the slightest changes in conditions can give rise to great consequences. Although, it was still too early to tell whether or not my actions were for the better. This was why I wasn't interested in interfering with events until now. Rather than playing as a manipulative mastermind, I was just confusing whatever factions were involved in this so-called war between heroes and villains. I couldn't forget my place. No matter what, I was just a normal general education student. I shouldn't delude myself into meddling with things far beyond my capabilities. It was better to simply focus on my own life instead. A loud smack echoed throughout the room. Say that again, you bastard. The entire class looked up in shock as they heard a loud voice. Even I couldn't help but stare in surprise as Shinso stood above another boy nursing a nasty bruise forming on his cheek. Did Shinso just punch a student? Sneering even as he got up, the boy Shinso punched glared back. Don't like the truth? If you don't like it so much, why not brainwash me to keep quiet? Take that back, Shinso growled. No, I'll stick to what I said. The boy blew a tuft of blonde hair away from his face. Your quirk is suited to only being a villain. Why you? Shinso began to move forward. Without thinking, I grabbed his shoulder. His glare switched from the blonde-haired boy to me, but at least he stopped his assault. Hey, knock it off you two. Class is about to begin soon. You want the teacher to catch his students brawling? He started it, Blondie complained. Cementos won't care, I replied. At this rate, both of you will get detention. Stop fighting. If you can't, wait until after school. Tisk. Shinso ripped his shoulder away from my grasp and moved to his seat. Blondie stared hatefully at him as he left, but he seemed to at least take my advice and drop the matter for now. I gave out a sigh of relief. Ugh, I forgot that high school is filled with drama. But really, what was that all about? From the looks of it, neither party seemed to be in the mood for an interrogation. So I decided to pull back my curiosity for now. Still, there was something I had to take care of first. Does anyone have an ice quirk? I called out. We can't have our teacher walk in to see a student with a bruise on his face. I do, someone raised his hand. Although, I need some water first. I can't make ice appear out of thin air. Can you use water from my thermos? I asked. Sure, that works. Taking a handkerchief out of my pocket, I waited until the other student froze a small chunk of ice before wrapping it up with the small piece of cloth. Turning around, I gave it to Blondie, who gave me a surprised look. Can you take care of the swelling on your own? Good. Keep the handkerchief, there's no need to return it. Just try not to start another fight in our classroom if you can. With that said, I returned to my seat right as Cementos entered the room. He raised a brow as he saw the makeshift ice pack, but didn't say anything else. As class began, I couldn't help but sense a certain student staring daggers into my back. I didn't know why Shinso was so interested in me, but his attention was a bit unnerving. The class period passed by slowly. Recalling my promise to Yumi a few days ago, I made arrangements to meet with Eraserhead once I was done with classes. So because of that, I found myself sitting in front of him with a nervous look on my face. He raised a brow. You want to know the details of your case? Yes, I found myself replying. I've already asked the police if they've made any progress on finding the person who stabbed me, but I haven't received any answers. I was wondering, since you're the only one I know who is somewhat related to the case, is there anything you can tell me? What makes you think I'll tell you anything if the police haven't? You're an underground hero, right? I'm not exactly sure how that kind of heroics works, but I assume that you have your methods of obtaining information. I'm just making a gamble that you've heard something. That's not what I asked. But it's why I came to you instead of the other heroes that tried to help that day, I replied. Sir, with all due respect, I just want some reassurance that I can walk home safely without worrying about being attacked. He stayed silent, and I took the time to take in his appearance while he was deep in thought. Compared to when I last met him almost a year ago, he seemed to have barely changed. A messy appearance with a haggard-looking face, a nostalgic sight for someone like me. To me, Eraserhead held a special place in my heart for a certain reason. Not because of my meta-knowledge from my past life, but because of how we first met in this one. He was the last person to keep 3 company as she left this world. He was the first face I saw after I regenerated. Maybe it was because of how we met that Eraserhead felt that he owed me. And it was that sense of guilt that I was taking advantage of to learn more about my killer. Eventually he spoke. Himiko Toga was last seen fleeing the Shizuoka prefecture as of 3 days ago, according to a vigilante contact I know. As far as I am aware, she has no idea that you managed to survive your encounter with her. You've confirmed that it was her? I frowned. I thought she had a transformation quirk. Wouldn't that make her hard to find normally? Apparently, it still has its limits. The police are still on the lookout for her, but for now, she's not in the area. You can reassure yourself that she won't be after you at the moment. I gave out a sigh of relief. Hearing that she wasn't in the area anymore really did help me relax. Eraserhead shuffled in his seat. There is another thing I would like to ask though. What is it? This may seem like a strange inquiry, but I have some questions about the specifics of your quirk. Strange seems to be an apt description. Any reason why you're asking? Just humor me for a bit. Well, sure. What exactly do you want to know? Eraserhead didn't immediately respond, instead reaching into a folder that was on the table next to him. Taking out several photos, he displayed them on the surface in a spread-out position so that I could see each image. They were photos of me, one for each of my regenerations. Your quirk, officially listed on record as regeneration, allows you to biologically transform into a new physical form after experiencing a life-threatening form of extreme trauma. After your revival process, your body takes on a new permanent form. From the reports on your quirk therapist, none of your bodies share the same genetic information other than a few parts that relate to the quirk factor in your DNA. That's correct. From what little research has determined, it was concluded that your new physical form is randomly determined. The only consistency is age, otherwise, all other factors are up in the air. Even gender is not guaranteed when regenerating. Is this leading to something? He leaned forward. My question is this: is it truly random? What? I'm asking whether or not the physical form that you take after regeneration is truly random, or if there is some sort of determining factor that allows you to control what you change into. Of course not, I denied. There's no pattern as far as I am aware other than the age thing. Why was he asking these questions? What reason did he have to need to ask about the specifics of my quirk? He frowned. Are you sure? Maybe you're simply unaware of such a factor due to the limited way of testing your quirk. The heck? I stood up angrily. Testing my quirk? Do you even hear what you're saying right now? Are you seriously telling this to the guy whose quirk only activates on death? He winced. That is. At least he looked apologetic. All right, this is getting nowhere. Why are you really asking these questions, Eraserhead? He sighed. Look, it's not important. Then there's no problem with telling me, is there? Eraserhead looked down instead of answering, and I soon grew annoyed. I was about to speak up until I realized that he wasn't just looking down randomly. Following his gaze, I saw that he was looking at one of the photos he placed on the table earlier. Specifically, the photo that has the image of my third regeneration. I thought I misjudged what I saw, he said. A few weeks after we met, I continued looking into the Toga investigation during my free time. While chasing down leads, I heard rumors of a girl that shared a similar appearance to your old self coming in and out of an abandoned factory. Toga, I muttered. She did stab me quite deeply. She must have gotten a bit of my blood to use for her quirk. I thought so too. I initially assumed that she used your blood to temporarily transform into your old self and borrow your appearance. He sighed. Still, I continued to hear about the rumors. I figured that they might have been clues to Toga's hideout, so I made sure to keep an ear out. Where was this going? Then I received a report that Toga was seen fleeing across the city from the first sighting. But by the time I did so, I had already done my homework and visited the place in question. Eraserhead looked up and stared at me. And imagine my surprise when I found out that the rumors weren't mistaken. I paused. Wait, what? Inside the abandoned factory was a girl approximately in her early teen years. Upon seeing me, she attempted to flee and I reflexively used my quirk on her. I'm sure you're aware that my quirk can negate the effects of other quirks, except for mutant-type abilities. This girl, I tried to gather my thoughts. You're saying she looked like me? Her appearance was easily recognizable as that of your previous form, he answered. And yet, my quirk didn't work on her. So her appearance isn't due to the work of a transformation-type quirk. As far as I can tell, she truly does look like a carbon copy of your old self. I couldn't think. Here he was, telling me that there was somebody going around the city looking like how I used to look. I recalled his earlier words. You have a theory about my quirk? Is that why you asked all those questions? Yes, he replied. If you can recall, I proposed the possibility that there may be an undiscovered part of your quirk that influences whatever new physical form you take after a regeneration. My reasoning for such a theory came from the idea that maybe instead of being random, it was borrowed. I understood immediately. You think that my regenerations take on the appearance of other people? The implication behind that idea was scary. The fact that even my current appearance was simply just a copy of someone else, somebody that I didn't know. But to clarify, it's just a thought. Eraserhead gave me an amused smile. I somehow managed to lose track of the girl afterward, so I couldn't ask for her input. It was only after I received the report on Toga that I dismissed her as the villain in question. But the fact that she looked like your previous self, I'm curious as to whether or not it's the work of your quirk. I remained silent. He stood up. Well, there's your answer. I'm worried about this mysterious doppelganger of yours, considering the first time you and I met was during a murder. But most likely, this has something to do with an undiscovered aspect of your quirk. With what I've just revealed, I encourage you to seek out a quirk counselor to somehow test whether this is the case or not. After all, the possibility that even your current mailed form might have a doppelganger in this city isn't zero. He began to clean the table of the photos from before. If you still have any questions regarding the capture of Toga, feel free to send me a message anytime you like. I can't promise I'll respond promptly, but I'll make sure to keep an eye on my inbox during my free time. I thanked him as he handed me a slip with his email before I exited the room. Still, I couldn't help but go over all the things he told me earlier. The fact that I might be borrowing the appearances of other people still nagged at me. Not to mention the doppelganger that Eraserhead saw. A girl that I used to look like was running around the city. If any of my old friends and family run into her, what kind of encounter would that be? The excitement of enrolling into UA was already gone by the end of the week. Classes were agonizingly long on Saturday, even if there were fewer compared to the rest of the week. As someone who was raised in the American education system in a past life, the strangeness of school days during the weekend never appealed to me. Leaving the school grounds, I decided to see if Yumi was willing to hang out again. Since I wasn't worried about going around town anymore, I pulled out my phone and sent her a text. Hatsu, you free today? Yun, sorry, I'm going out with some of my classmates. Hatsu, I see, never mind then. Yumi, if you're free, why not meet up with Kyotaro-sensei? He says that it's been a while since you last visited. Hatsu, since when have you talked with the old man? Last week. Your mom asked me a favor to bring him some groceries and we chatted. Yumi, I gotta go, my friends are calling me. See you another time. Hatsu later. Slipping the phone back into my pocket, I blinked in surprise as I saw a familiar shade of purple ahead of me. Shinso, still in his school uniform, was surrounded by several students wearing uniforms from other schools. The group slowly entered a nearby alley between a small store and the multi-tenant building next to it. Already, I had a bad feeling. Catching up, I saw that the entrance was somewhat dirty with leaves and trash littered along the floor. Definitely, a place most people would avoid normally unless you wanted to go somewhere that was out of sight. Oh, come on. Do I really have to do this? Curse my inner good Samaritan, knowing that Shinso was in meant that I had to at least check if he was okay. After deciding so, I entered the entrance to the alley. I saw that it led to another street on the other side, but a dark corner to the right showed that there was another path as well. Going inside, I took in the scene before me. There was Shinso all right. He was standing in a tense manner while the group that was with him before surrounded him. The tallest one had an arrogant smirk on his face while his friends snickered next to him. Clearly, this wasn't a friendly encounter. So, you actually made it into UA. Tell me, how much did you have to bribe the judges with to get away with that? What's it matter to you? Shinso asked. But even I could tell there was a hint of nervousness in his voice. It was obvious that Shinso realized how bad of a situation this was. Still, I bet you failed the entrance exam for the heroics courses? Tall guy chuckled. So where did they place you then? Support? Business? Oh wait, I'm guessing you're stuck as one of the general students? And what if I am? Are you kidding? That's the funniest thing I've ever heard. Tall guy laughed out loud. Weren't you the guy who was shouting how you would make it into the hero course all those months ago? And now look at you, just barely making the cut and still as useless as before. Without warning, Tall guy slammed a fist into Shinsu's stomach. What made the scene unusual was that his fist seemed to glow a strange orange as it did so. Gasping out loud, Shinso fell to his knees as Tall guy pulled his arm back. My eyes widened. So Tall guy had some kind of quirk that helped with his punches. But how come Shinso wasn't fighting back? Wait, no. Shinso looked like he was about to speak, but another fist slammed into him as he tried to do so. Did you think I would forget how you used it on me last time? As long as you don't get the chance to speak, you can't use that villain quirk of yours. So this was some kind of revenge hazing then? No. That's not what I should be focusing on now. I have to get him out of here. Hey! Everyone turned as I stepped forward with a phone in my hand. Unless you guys want to deal with the cops, I suggest stepping away from my classmate. Wait, why didn't I just make the call before I reveal myself? Act too late to take it back. Just hope that they get scared off by the threat. At least they looked nervous. All except for Tall guy for some reason. He still had that smirk on his face. Kibbo eyes? At those words, I yelped as I felt the phone in my hand suddenly heat up. Drawing my hand back, I saw that my palm was now a reddish pink, almost as if it was burned. Taking advantage of my distraction, one of his goons rushed forward and pushed me to the ground. My face was barely able to make out the face of Tall guy staring down at me with glee. Sorry to say, but Kibbo's quirk targets plastic. Pretty sure your phone is beyond repair at this point too. I glanced over and almost cried as I noticed that the device was now a melted mess. That came out of my own pocket money from part-time jobs? Damn it. Now, how about we show you our appreciation for that stupid move of yours earlier? Stop. Shinso finally spoke. Leave him alone. But nobody replied to him. Which made sense if they knew what his quirk was. Another friend of Tall Guy was keeping hold of Shinso, so I couldn't expect any help from him either. I felt myself get pulled up as Tall Guy's friend held my arms behind my back. Preparing his fist, Tall Guy pulled his arm back for another punch. At that same moment, I made my own move. Jerking my head backward, I smashed my skull into the nose of the guy holding on to me, causing him to cry out as he let me go. At the same time, I grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him forward right as Tall Guy's fist impacted him in the chest. Surprised that he hit his friend instead, I moved forward and yelled as I bent my elbow and struck him in the armpit with an upward elbow strike. The armpit is a major nerve center. Striking there will hurt like hell, and a person of any size won't be able to endure that kind of pain. Tall Guy proved this fact as he screamed in agony at the top of his lungs. I took advantage of this and hooked my foot around his heel, causing him to trip and fall on his butt. Placing a foot right above his head, the warning made him freeze. The guy holding onto my friend, my voice echoed. Unless you guys aren't that close with the guy I'm stepping on, I suggest that you please remove your arms from him right now. I gave off a creepy smile. Death comes only once, after all. No need to risk your friend rushing towards it. Hurriedly, Shinso was released after I said that. I nodded, then removed my foot from Tall Guy before quickly grabbing onto Shinso's arm and bolting the heck out of there. No matter how well I knew to fight, it was still a situation where there were two guys against a group. I wasn't willing to bet my chances on that if quirks came into play, especially since I was effectively quirkless in a fight. We didn't stop running until we were out of the alley and into the open street. Even then, we still walked quickly from the area until we were quite a distance away. Finally, Shinso spoke. How did you do that? Do what? That thing with your elbow. Learned it in a class that teaches basic combat, I replied. The thing about fighting is that no matter how much you use your fists, the bones in your hands can get injured easily. But the bones in your elbows are naturally strong, even for people who don't train. I paused to demonstrate the move again. You can either strike from the inside like an uppercut, I pulled back my arm, or you can strike from the outside by thrusting it forward instead. I struck with a straight jab using my elbow. Simple enough, but quite dangerous. The two of us continued to walk together. Was this part of your hero training? I quirked an eyebrow. This was part of my self-defense lessons. My mother enrolled me in those classes after I was taken hostage by a villain when I was still in elementary school. And died, not that I said that part out loud. Shinso seemed stunned for some reason, and I wasn't sure what to say to him now that we were away from danger. I wasn't exactly close to him. Rather, I was pretty sure he had a negative opinion of me if I took into account his past actions. Why aren't you in the hero course? I looked over to Shinso, who was looking at me with the most incredulous look on his face. Your quirk is good, you know how to fight. Why didn't you apply to become a hero? Because I don't want to. My answer stupefied him. Not everyone wants to be a hero. I sighed. It takes more than just a good quirk and knowing a bit of self-defense to become someone that others look up to. If anything, I'd probably be better as a police officer or some other type of law enforcement in the future. I stopped walking. So how long are you going to follow me? What? Pointing to the gates right next to us, the words, Kyotaro class, were displayed on a sign above the door. Shinso looked curious, so I began to explain when he turned to look at me. This is where I learned that move I showed you earlier. If you want to watch a class, I don't think Kyotaro-sensei will mind. I rolled my eyes as I saw him hesitate. You know what, just come with me. Without giving him a chance to refuse, I pulled his arm and dragged him through the doors with me. Entering the building, I ignored the students practicing in the main room and pulled Shinso with me to the back. Sensei, it's Hatsu. I'm borrowing your break room for a bit. I didn't bother waiting for a reply before I opened a door and dragged Shinso inside. He stood awkwardly at the door while I rummaged through the large refrigerator. Turning around with an ice pack, I raised a brow. What are you doing? Lift your shirt already? Shinso gave me a surprised look. Icha? That guy hit you with his quirk earlier. There's no way you don't have any bruises. Don't think I haven't noticed you breathing hard during our walk here. He slowly nodded in understanding, before following my order and pulling his shirt up to reveal the damage. I winced as I saw an ugly purple forming on the surface of his skin. Hold and press, I passed him the ice pack. I'll get you some medicine. Fair warning, it's probably going to taste disgusting, but it'll help with the bruising. Finding a boiler, I set the automatic timer to heat up a small cup. While I was looting the medicine cabinet for the herbal medicine, the door suddenly opened as a large middle-aged man appeared. Damn brat. It's been forever. Shinso almost dropped the ice pack in fright at the volume. It probably didn't help that Kyotaro was a hulk of a man and built like a tank. To those that didn't know him, his mere presence was intimidating enough. Obviously, I wasn't affected after knowing him for so long. Hey sensei, I gave a whimsical greeting. Where's the stuff for abdominal pain? Yellow bottle, third shelf. Ah, thanks. I saw what he described and grabbed it. Pouring a small amount into a cup, I mixed the powder with hot water and presented it to Shinso. Hope you're okay with bitter things, this one's a bit strong. Taking a sip, Shinso gagged but managed to swallow. Kyotaro observed the scene with narrowed eyes. Did the two of you get into a fight? Ran the first opportunity one got, I answered. Some guys tried to make a move on us. One of them had a quirk that enhanced the blows behind his fist. My classmate got hit straight in the gut, so I figured that he needed some minor treatment. Nice to see some sense in you. Kyotaro's face turned to a frown. Wait, what's that on your hand? I blinked before I realized that he was talking about the burn from before. Huh, I almost forgot about that. If it doesn't hurt, it's probably not that bad. Still, best to apply some cream to ease the inflammation. There's some aloe vera in a small tube on the second shelf. I see it, thanks. As I began applying the cream across my hand, Shinso spoke up. I thought your quirk was regeneration? Shouldn't the burn have healed on its own? My initial reaction after he asked that was to redirect the conversation. Even though I was fine with others learning about it, I was not that comfortable with everyone in our class knowing about it. Not that I assumed that Shinso would tell anyone since I doubted he would care enough to do so. Kyotaro guffawed. If only his quirk was that useful. Ah well, best to rip off the band-aid now instead of later. My face turned into a grimace. My healing capabilities are the same as everyone else. My quirk only works under a specific condition. Condition? Death, Kyotaro explained. Every time he dies, he revives with a cost. In exchange for being brought back to life, his body and personality change randomly into a new person. Effectively, he still dies since a new person replaces him. Shinso's eyes widened. What? I'm technically less than a year old, I added. Kyotaro-sensei has already seen 3 previous regenerations of me. That's true, Kyotaro nodded. I knew the brat since his mother used to be an old friend of mine. When he died during a hostage situation with a villain, I trained the kid so that she would know how to at least protect himself the next time she got caught in a sticky situation. Shinso blinked. Wait, she? Girl in my past regeneration, I simply explained. Different body, different personality, even different gender. That's just how my quirk works. His female version was a real firecracker, Kyotaro continued. Girl used to challenge me to mock spars every day. Wanted to be a hero, that one. Compared to this brat here, she was one of my best students yet. I smiled wryly. Kyotaro-sensei was one of the biggest influences in 3's life when she was growing up. It was to the point where 3 considered Kyotaro as a role model. He not only taught her how to fight and defend herself, but he also imparted parts of his personality onto her since the two were often together during her free time. It was an interesting exploration of nature versus nurture. Since a personality was a combination of both, the influence of regenerating into a new body directly impacted the nature of a person. While the aspects of a personality that was shaped by nurture would not change, the nature of the new regeneration would affect the new personality. My current nature made me less inclined towards combat, but the influences of Kyotaro's lessons still helped me resolve the earlier situation using the moves he taught me. Shinso was gobsmacked. Hey, I forgot to ask something. I turned to look at Kyotaro. Earlier, when I was facing off the guys who cornered Shinso, I realized that I didn't know how to fight against multiple people at once. Ah, Kyotaro nodded in understanding. That's a problem that happens when you try to translate practice spars into real-life situations. I'm guessing you're wondering how you're supposed to approach a situation like that. I nodded. He gestured for the both of us to follow him, and the three of us moved to the main room where several of Kyotaro's students were practicing. Most of them were high school to college age, with all of them dressed in a simple uniform similar to Kyotaro's own outfit. Embarrassingly, the ones that paused to turn our way brightened as they saw me approach. The princess has returned. Really? The princess is back? The dojo's princess is here? All hail the princess. The audacity of these idiots. Stop it with that nickname. My face immediately turned red. How can anyone take me seriously if you keep calling me by that? To my dismay, everyone just laughed at my reaction. I swore I saw even Shinso smirk from the corner of my eye. All right, settle down. Kyotaro stepped forward. It's time for a demonstration match. I'll need a volunteer to help me explain a lesson. I'll do it. One of them raised a hand. I vaguely recognized him as a guy who was training to be a police officer. Good, Kyotaro nodded. Hataka, let me ask you a question. Do you think you can go up against multiple people at once? Hataka hesitated. Maybe 5 people at most? For if I'm playing safe. Think you're okay with sparring against that number to test that theory? Sure. Okay, Kyotaro turned to face his students. Can I have 4 volunteers to go up against him? None of the advanced students are allowed to volunteer. The room cleared as Hataka stood in the middle of a group of 4 students. Shinso moved to sit next to me, and I saw clearly that he was curious about the outcome of the match. Remember, this is only a spar. Light blows only, and proceed until I say to stop. Hataka, I give you permission to use your quirk to protect yourself. Kyotaro raised a hand. Begin. The 4 students didn't charge in all at once. Instead, they slowly closed in on him as one took the lead and led with a punch. While Hataka was distracted dealing with the sole attacker, the other 3 closed in on him and started their own attacks as well. I was surprised to find that Hataka actually fended them off pretty well. Despite the flurry of blows going for his back and front, he managed to either redirect them or block the attacks for the most part. A slight glow began to surround his body the longer he fought, and I realized that he was using his quirk to protect himself from getting hurt. Still, it was obvious that he was having trouble. For every attack he blocked, at least 2 managed to hit him while he was distracted. Hataka couldn't help but switch to dodging attacks instead of simply deflecting them, and that was his downfall. As his attackers pressured him, Hataka eventually backed up against a wall and found himself surrounded. Once he was cornered, he was unable to dodge as he did before. There was nothing he could do as they all began to rain blow after blow on him. Stop! Kyotaro called the match, and the students surrounding Hataka backed away. Hataka himself was barely injured, but not because he managed to fend off the blows. It was obvious that his quirk helped for the most part, and unless another person had a quirk that also protected them, anyone else in his position would have been riddled with bruises. Hataka, anything to share with us? Kyotaro asked. It was a lot more difficult than I thought, he replied. After a while, I was being pressed back until I couldn't escape. Once that happened, it was harder to counter their attacks. Can you think of a method that might help if you get into a situation like that in real life? Try to control my surroundings, Hataka answered. Maybe move into an open area so that I don't get cornered. Or even better, run away until I'm somewhere safe. Next to me, I saw Shinso blink in surprise at the answer. But Kyotaro nodded in agreement. That's right. I always say that fleeing isn't a shameful action, but simply another option. Better to live another day than to see yourself get killed. In this case, however, there's one more answer that is somewhat similar to your first answer. He gestured towards the 4 students from before. Try sparring against me. This time, pace your movements so that everyone can see your attacks. Yes, sensei. It was the same situation as before, only instead Kyotaro was replacing Hataka. The 4 students moved to charge forward him, their speeds somewhat slower compared to before. But before they could reach Kyotaro, he exploded into action. He was still moving at a slow pace, but his movements were more dynamic compared to Hataka. It was almost as if he was zigzagging across the room, as he moved towards each attacker and faked an attack towards each student. First student, punch failed to hit. Kyotaro makes a punch that stops before hitting the head. Second student, suddenly surprised when Kyotaro moves to trip him. Pulling on his clothes, student falls to the ground. Third student, distance between him and Kyotaro shrinks quickly before he could retreat. Elbow towards chest, pausing before it lands. Fourth student, Kyotaro leads with a light charge using shoulder and body. Student gently falls to the ground. Throughout the sequence, Kyotaro moved into a position so that any attempts at a counterattack failed before they could begin. And still, he paced his speed so that he was on the same level as the student attacking him at the time. Had this been a real spar, I could easily imagine the pace picking up where Kyotaro would move even faster than they could. In such a situation, all 4 students would be on the ground nursing injuries. Understand now? Kyotaro asked. Instead of controlling your surroundings, control the flow of the battlefield. Maneuver your body so that you both avoid a strike and also position yourself in a better situation to strike back. It's not simply just dodging you have to worry about, you also have to think ahead to how you can take advantage of your foe. This means you have to use your whole body to change how you are positioned relative to your opponents. I think I understood. There was a pretty similar philosophy in several martial arts that focused on this method. Using a mixture of footwork and pivoting the body, this was basically trying to apply a strategy that helps so that you only have to focus on one opponent at a time. Everyone clapped as the demonstration ended, even Shinso surprisingly enough. Once Kyotaro was done talking with his students, he moved over to where the 2 of us were. So, what did you think? Somehow, Shinso ended up signing up for a full week's worth of free lessons. I didn't bother to comment on Kyotaro's worrying business strategy and instead just waited for Shinso to finish talking with my former teacher. Still, it wasn't until the sun was already setting that the 2 of us finally left the building together. Really, I should turn back the dial on the meddlesome part of me if this ends up as the result. After all, there was no need to wait for Shinso if I wanted to leave. Hey! Shinsu's voice broke my train of thought, and I turned to face him. What is it? Thanks a lot for what you did today, he said. Not just now, but also earlier. When you helped me against those guys from before. His attitude was a lot better now compared to when we first talked. It almost made him seem like a different person. No problem, I replied. I should at least help you pay for a new phone since it's kind of my fault that it got broken. But shoot, I completely forgot about that. But really, what was he saying? Who would expect him to pay for something that wasn't his fault? Seriously, it's fine. No, it isn't. I'm glad that he was trying to make it up to me. But his gratitude was a bit misplaced here, and it was starting to become annoying. I'm telling you it's alright. I was planning on upgrading the model anyway, and it's not even your fault that I lost it. If anything, I blame those 3 idiots from before. They wouldn't have done anything if it wasn't for me. What was the term? Victim blaming? Was Shinso that set on the idea that everything was his fault? Those guys knew about your quirk. Were they from your old school or something? Only one of them was. The tall guy with the fist quirk. Huh, so even Shinso calls him tall guy. But it's the same either way. When people hear that I have a villain's quirk, they all act the same. Are you including me in that? Shinso paused. Most people act the same, he clarified. Those that don't treat me like shit just try to avoid me. Although, I never had anyone stand up to me like that. So again, thanks for before. You're starting to sound like a parrot. Just take the compliment, you bastard. Both of us grew silent. Hey, about your quirk. Is it supposed to be some kind of secret? It took me a moment to respond. My guess? I mean, I don't mind if you tell someone. I just don't want all my classmates walking on eggshells around me if possible. What is it like? He asked. Dying, I mean. Depends, I replied. I've been killed in a hit and run, had my neck snapped by a villain, and even been stabbed in the chest. Each death is different from the other, but I'm guessing that's not what you're asking about. No, it was to be expected. There was always someone interested in knowing what the experience was like. Even if it was uncomfortable to talk about, I always answered whenever somebody asked. I don't truly die, I continued. My quirk allows me to retain the memories of my entire life every time I regenerate. So it's not the same as dying permanently. But there's this moment when I realize that I'm about to die, and then my quirk activates. Every cell in my body works to do whatever it can to save me, and then it does. I wrapped my arms around myself. Then there's the moment, that second between dying and being reborn, when I feel my former self getting every trace of them wiped away so that there's room for a new person to take their place. At that moment, the last vestiges of whoever I was before dies. And then there's just me. A new person, carrying on a legacy of who I used to be. My smile was strained. I don't think there's anyone alive who can understand what it's like. Did I really just do a character filibuster? If there was any doubt that I was reborn in an anime world, that sealed it. No way would Zero have been able to say something like this in his life. Sounds terrifying, Shinso said. It is, I agreed. Death is always scary, no matter how much anyone thinks they're ready for it. And then we stopped at a crossroad. Seeing Shinso shift his body in one direction, I realized that this was where we would split up. He hesitated. I'll see you on Monday then. Bye Shinso, I replied amiably. Both of us looked away and resumed our respective paths home. The weekend passed with relative mundanity, and I found myself back in class. Despite the bonding moment between Shinso and me a few days ago, nothing particularly changed. It wasn't as if we were friends all of a sudden, and I was already full on my quota of social interaction for the month. So that was how I found myself eating alone in the cafeteria. What? You're asking how come I'm not eating with anyone else? Ha, you seriously underestimate my people skills if you think I can easily make friends. There was a good reason why I still clung to Yumi like a limpet even after graduating. Alright, that's enough breaking the fourth wall for today. Finished with my lunch, I went to throw away my trash. Too bad I didn't have my phone anymore, since I could have spent my lunch using the internet. I bumped into someone, causing me to fall to the floor as I met unexpected resistance. The person that bumped into me staggered, but remained standing. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It's fine, I replied. Guess I was lost in thought, wasn't watching where I was walking. My apologies. A hand was held in front of me, and I reflexively grabbed it. My name is Izuku Midoriya, sorry for making you fall. Hatsu Ijima. I allowed myself to be pulled up. His eyes widened. No way. Are you really? I blinked. Wait, do you know me or something? I saw you on the news once, he answered excitedly. You're the luminescent child, aren't you? You're the person who managed to take out the villain Muscular. That caused me to wince. But no wonder he recognized me then. Midoriya was referring to the incident where the villain managed to kill me and force me to regenerate. The process of regeneration was not exactly as simple as changing into a new body. While regenerating, the process itself necessitated an energy discharge for me to change. Often enough, that meant that the expelled energy would be dispersed into the area around me, sometimes in a very explosive manner. Upon regenerating into 3, while I was in the midst of confusion from the aftereffects of regeneration, I somehow managed to direct whatever leftover regeneration energy I still had into a blast that took out Muscular. Somebody managed to capture the incident on camera, and a news station decided to slap me with the title of Luminescent Child. And yes, the parallels between that name and the luminescent baby weren't a coincidence. I was just lucky that they only managed to capture the events after I already regenerated on film. While the news managed to somehow figure out my name, they at least hadn't reported to the public what exactly my quirk was. Can you please not call me that? I don't exactly like that name. Oh, sorry. He lowered his head before blinking in confusion. Hold on, the luminescent child was clearly a girl, wasn't it? Quirk side effect, I simply explained. Midoriya started to mumble to himself. Really? What kind of side effect is that? From what the news showed, your quirk was something like an expulsion of destructive energy concentrated into a blast. How does that have anything to do with changing between genders? Or maybe the act of changing itself powers the blasts, but that would be it. Really weird activation requirement. Jeez, does this guy talk? Before he could go off on another tangent, I interrupted him. Well, nice meeting you. Ah. He blinked as he returned to reality. Oh sure. See you then. The two of us walked in separate directions. And thus ended my interaction with the main character. I should really try and get a new phone by this weekend. It was going to be annoying if I spent the rest of my breaks without anything to entertain me. Since the only thing that I had to worry about was the upcoming UA Sports Festival in regards to canon, I could take this as a period to relax. Except, there was that thing with Stain going after pro heroes that I had to warn somebody about. Although, this was going to be a lot harder to meddle with compared to the USJ. Hopefully, I could figure something out by then. My memory wasn't exactly great, but I was pretty sure that Stain was going to target Ida's brother. Ingenium was a pretty popular hero, so there were probably ways of figuring out his patrol routes. There were probably a few villains out there who pay people to dox popular heroes for just that reason. I kind of wish I could just skip the sports festival. Since I was just a general studies student, I wasn't motivated to try hard or anything. Unlike Shinso, I did not have a desire to transfer into the hero course. Ugh, I'll see if I can find out a way to warn Ingenium before the festival arrives. Class ended quickly on Tuesday, and I headed home for the day. Once I entered my house, I saw a stack of papers sitting on the table nearby. From the top sheet, it was clear that those were meant to be addressed to me. Picking them up, I took them to my room to read. Since my quirk was an extremely volatile ability, I was used to getting updates from various professionals in numerous fields about anything new they discovered about my quirk. In exchange for maintaining my health and bod, IES, they were able to gain access to various samples from my body to further their research in whatever field they specialized in. Reading through the latest batch of reports sent by my doctors, I gave out an annoyed sigh. No, I didn't care about the benefits of localized hypertrichosis. I'm too young to worry about balding issues. Who even approved forwarding this idea to me? Problems with body dysphoria found after regeneration? Unless you count the fact that I no longer like certain foods, I haven't noticed anything too unusual. Post-regeneration notwithstanding, that was never not going to be a confusing experience. But wait, this one actually looks interesting. I never noticed that my blood type remained consistent throughout my regenerations. A cell activation quirk to kickstart the regeneration process in separated cells? Note to self, follow up with Shimano-san about this experiment. It wasn't until an hour later that I finished going through them. Heading downstairs, I found my mother in the living room watching some kind of television show. She must have come home while I was still immersed in reading. Having a nice day, Mom? My mother spoke without turning back. The newest episode just came out a few minutes ago. Pro hero Mike Guy came to the rescue and saved an entire hotel from terrorists. Except for the employees, they turned traitor and revealed that they were in cahoots with the terrorists all along. Sounds riveting. 7 out of 10 at best, she replied. And the only reason it's not a 5 is that the lead actor is showing off his bare chest. Muscles sell, I said. Just don't let Dad hear. He might get jealous of the All Might XP, or he'll decide to hit the gym, my mother dismissed. So, how was school? It's all right, I replied. Want me to prepare something for dinner? You sure you're up to it? Yeah, why not? Be careful using the knife. I have 10 fingers, so I'll try to keep as many as I can. I rolled my eyes while I walked to the kitchen. Seriously, it's nothing hard. I'll make some fried eggs and steamed cabbages. She hummed and I got to work. It was rare that my mother got the chance to relax at home, not with how busy her job usually was. I didn't know the specifics, but she was apparently some kind of high-ranking official in a support tech company. Mainly on the administrative side, she abused her quirk over time to complete several people's worth of workload by herself. A quirk that made someone more productive the more overworked and stressed they were. It was an evil quirk that I was glad I never inherited. I felt nothing but pity for my mother and her lifestyle. Once the food was done, I grabbed a few bowls to fill with rice and placed them on the table next to the plate of eggs and cabbage. My mother sat down with me once I did so. I heard from Kyotaro that you visited him with a friend. He's not a friend, I replied. More of an acquaintance really. You know, it's unhealthy how lacking a social life you have. You should try and get to know your classmates more. Are you suggesting that I'm bad at talking to people? I am suggesting that you are deliberately trying to avoid interacting with people, and if not, then you are content with the situation being that way. Compared to your previous selves, You're a lot more meek. Don't let that hold you back from making new friends at your school. You know, if you took into account the memories of my past life, that would mean that my mother was technically almost the same age as me. Yet I knew better to compare our past experiences with each other. She had the chance to grow up and accept the life of an adult while I was forced to repeat my high school days once again. Grating as it was, I had to admit that she was probably right. Fine, I muttered. I'd hate it if you were troubled by your introverted son not being able to develop his social skills. I love an understanding child. Know where I can get one? Wait till the next regeneration. That's a bit morbid, isn't it? Got a joke about my life, I replied. 'Cause sure as shit I'm not gonna cry about it. If I could find humor even in death, then maybe life wasn't so bad after all. Since meeting Izuku a few days ago, I decided to avoid the cafeteria for the time being. Not that he wasn't a nice fellow, but I wasn't interested in bringing up my past if I could help it. A strange sensation caressed the back of my neck while my skin prickled. Somebody was near me. Turning around, I blinked in surprise as I saw someone sitting close to me while unaware of my presence. His lonesome form stood out, especially since it was clear to me how haggard and emaciated the man was. Despite never meeting him before in my life, I instantly recognized him. All Might took a sip out of a water bottle. Good Lord, somebody give that man a sandwich. It would have been nice if that was all. But something must have attracted his attention because All Might turned towards my direction and finally noticed me staring at him. The man blinked in surprise as I froze, the two of us not knowing what to do. My hand gave a little wave. Nice weather we're having. I didn't think I said anything wrong. Sure, it was a stale greeting. But there was nothing about what I said that should have been shocking. No matter how bad I was at talking to strangers, there was no way what I said was supposed to surprise anyone. All Might didn't seem to get the memo. Bleerg. Without warning, blood spat out of his mouth. Oich my gosh, I screeched. I am so sorry. Immediately, I tore across the field to stand next to the kneeling man dripping blood out of his mouth. I didn't know what to do, so I just instinctively pulled out my handkerchief and held it towards him in hopes that he would know what to do with it. Thank you. His throat rumbled as he took the piece of cloth. Sorry, that must have been a surprise. Do you need me to call someone? I asked. Teachers? Paramedics? Recovery girl? And no, that won't be necessary. He shakily stood up. This is normal for me, I'm used to it by now. Vomiting up blood is normal? An old injury from my past. Seeing such a scene from the person who was supposed to be the symbol of peace, I made a decision. This was probably going to cost me later down the line, but there was no way I could just leave after seeing something like this. Channeling my inner Amy Dallin asterisk, I held out a hand. Sir, do I have permission to heal you? What? Heal you? I repeated. My quirk allows me to, well, it's not meant to be used as a healing quirk. But if you want, I can help ease your wounds. He gave me a strange look but eventually nodded. All right, I'll trust myself in your care. Holding out a hand towards me, I clasped it with both of mine and closed my eyes. My hands began to glow dimly as golden energy began to transfer between me and the lanky man until his whole chest began glowing the same golden hue. Regeneration energy. There was always a certain amount stored inside of my body in preparation for the next case of my demise. Sparing just a small amount to heal someone was technically possible, even if the consequences normally made me decide otherwise. Hopefully, my later regenerations will forgive me for doing this. No doubt I'll develop some minor genetic abnormalities in my next incarnation. Probably bad eyesight or asthma. Maybe an allergy to pollen, nothing too serious. I almost staggered as I let go. There, that should do it. This won't be enough to fix all of your issues, but it might help so that you don't cough up blood in the future. Young man, All Might seemed shocked. My chest, it's like something has been lifted from my shoulders. I don't know what to say. Most would probably replying thank you, so I'll just skip that part and saying you're welcome. I don't know how to repay you. You don't owe me anything, I said with a firm tone. Just make sure to check with your doctor to check for any complications. Honestly, it's a bit hypocritical to tell you this, but you really shouldn't let random strangers use untested quirks on you even if you give them permission. Speaking of which, what's your name? Tashinori Yagi? Yagi-san, I addressed him. Nice to meet you, my name is Hatsu Ijima. Tell your doctor to look up my name in the quirk registry. If you make a request, your medical practitioner can get some copies of my medical history to see how my quirk works with healing you. Right? I'm babbling. Sorry, I do that sometimes when I get stressed. That's not your fault, it's just this is the first time I've ever tried to heal someone. Am I overwhelming you? Sorry if I'm overwhelming you. The bell rang, and I realized that it was time for me to get back to class. Okay, I'm going to go now. Make sure you keep your body healthy and fit, Yagi-san. I'll see you around by now. Without waiting for him to respond, I quickly ran out of the area. I was a little late leaving school, so I started running on the way home. My shirt stuck uncomfortably to my back when I reached my neighborhood. Near the gates to my house, I stopped in my tracks. Yumi was waiting at the entrance again, playing on her cell with a confused look on her face. If I had to guess, I assumed that she was attempting to call me. A fruitless effort, seeing as I have yet to replace my phone still. Oh, she finally noticed me. Hey Hatsu, maybe I should give you a copy of our house key, I replied as I moved past her to open the gate. You come here enough to warrant it? Wait, hold on. She bounced after me. I was planning on visiting Kyotaro-sensei. Wanna come with me? Can I change out of my uniform first? Sure, I'll wait. Yumi sat down in the living room after saying that. Seeing that she was behaving, I shook my head and went upstairs to my room. By the time I came down, she was practically at home with how she was sprawled across the couch. She perked up when she noticed me. Ready to go? Yup. The two of us walked out of the house together. For some reason, the two of us were holding hands together. But I attributed that to how Yumi was with physical contact. By the way, how come I couldn't call you earlier? Phone broke over the weekend. Some guy with a quirk that affected plastic melted it when I threatened to call the cops. Why did you need to call the cops? A classmate of mine was being picked on. I intervened and lost my phone in the scuffle. Yumi frowned. You were in another fight? Yes, that's what happened. She stopped walking and brought her face abruptly close to mine, before glancing up and down my body to check for something. I looked back at her uncomfortably, until she calmed down and smiled. At least you weren't injured. I kept quiet about the burn. I know how to take care of myself. Sometimes I wonder. She lined up next to me like it was completely natural, and the two of us continued walking. Despite the smile on her face, I had a feeling that she was in a bad mood. Before long, we found ourselves at Kyotaro's place and the two of us entered. To my surprise, the first person I noticed was Shinso. Somehow, I completely forgot that he was taking lessons here after school. He looked as if he was taking a break when he noticed the two of us walk in. Oh, it's you. His gaze turned towards Yumi. Who's that? Your girlfriend? Yumi huffed and crossed her arms underneath her chest. Guys and girls can't be simply friends? This is Yumi, I said before things could escalate. We've known each other since middle school, and we aren't dating. We're just friends. Best friends, she clarified. That kind of relationship means premarital hand-holding and hugs when either of us is sad. Also, playful gestures that annoy the other person. Right after saying that, she pressed her index finger against the tip of my nose. Boop. Shinso just gave her a weird look. I gently pushed Yumi's hand away. Anyway, is Kyotaro-sensei around? We're here to visit him. He's in the back right now. Gotcha, thanks Shinso. He waved us off as the both of us walked together. Was he the classmate you were talking about earlier? Yumi asked. Yeah, that's him. Oh wow, so you do have friends? Yumi, I fail to understand how you managed to make that sound like an insult with such positive-sounding words. She beamed brightly at me. I rolled my eyes. And that's wrong, we're just classmates. You two could grow closer, Yumi argued. I mean, what kind of meeting involves saving someone from a bunch of delinquents? Most friendships are born out of less exciting events, so it wouldn't be strange. Opportunity comes from the weirdest places, but it's easy to miss 'cause it looks like work. Don't let this chance slip away. Did you steal that speech from somewhere? Daytime television, she admitted. But you know I'm right. Let the power of friendship compel you. Make friends with the purple-haired high schooler. Why am I still friends with you? Because I'm cute, spunky, and I have you wrapped around my teeny, tiny finger like the adorable vixen I am. Lord, give me patience in dealing with this girl. You're obnoxious? And being obnoxious is how I show affection. Thanks, I hate it. Liar, you love me. A voice spoke from behind them. Are the two of you just gonna flirt all day, or are you going to finally greet me properly? Kyotaro-sensei. Yumi grinned as she skipped forward to give the older man a casual hug. It's been a while. The two broke apart and looked in my direction. I held my hands up. I ain't hugging you. How about a nice handshake instead, brat? He rolled his eyes. So, what's the occasion? Planning on training for the sports festival like your friend? Why would I do that? Kyotaro just gave Yumi a look, which wasn't exactly offensive in itself, but it still annoyed me either way. The kid has been humbled too much. What happened to his spunk when he was still a girl? Ayumi shrugged. I've come to terms that Hatsu is now a grumpy bunny. Soft and adorable, even though he has a mopey look on his face all the time. Why am I suddenly being compared to a rabbit? It's a compliment, Yumi answered. You're like the killer rabbit of Kerbanag's star. Are you talking about the pro hero Miruko? Kyotaro asked with a confused look. Pretty sure she's referring to an old movie, I answered. Although, why the heck would she compare me to a killer rabbit is beyond me. What about your old dream of being a hero? Kyotaro asked. Do you seriously not want to train to become one anymore? See, here's my problem with that. I settled into a lecturing tone. The sports festival is an annual event held by UA to showcase our abilities in order to be scouted by pro heroes and support agencies. This is also a representation of observing the future generation of heroes tasked with upholding the peace and safety of our public, which logically means we want people with heroic-aligned morals. But as it turns out, the criteria for selecting heroes have nothing to do with being a person with strong morals. Rather, it's more about having powerful and flashy quirks. Which you don't have, Yumi followed up. So are you just gonna do nothing? I'm going to give it my all as a regular student, I countered. Not as someone training to be a hero because frankly, that's not what I want anymore. But as someone who wants to win an event like any normal person seeking satisfaction in their accomplishments. Which brings me back to my original question. Kyotaro interrupted. Why aren't you training? No amount of fisticuffs will help me against someone who can shoot fire or break through walls. There's more to sparring than that, Kyotaro argued. Just the experience of fighting against opponents with a variety of quirks will help you accumulate more experience. That's the whole point of my students training here in the first place. Or socializing, Yumi added. Because, frankly, you need more opportunities to do that. Pretty sure I know most of the students here. Except one of them, she teased. How about this? Why not train with that classmate of yours? I blinked. Shinso? Kyotaro seemed to think it over. That actually might be a good idea. Shinso is still pretty new to fighting in close quarters, and 2 weeks is nowhere near enough for him to catch up to the hero students. But if you help him out by teaching him some tricks, maybe you'll gain some experience as well. Do I have a say in this? Nope. I hate it when the two of them team up on me. Shinso stood across from me as we both settled into our respective stances. So you're going to teach me how to fight? Pretty much, I confirmed. Kyotaro-sensei will still help with handling your body conditioning while I teach you a few tricks. Tell you what, I'm free pretty much every hour outside of school times. I'll give you a schedule, and if you promise to listen to whatever I say, I'll try and see if I can help you get a leg over those hero course students in the festival. Are you even qualified? He asked. I mean, I know you know how to fight, but I'm already learning from Kyotaro-sensei. And the only time I've seen you fight someone, you weren't exactly overpowering your opponent. The first time I fought against a villain was when I was 11. I managed to subdue him without any formal martial art education solely based on using every dirty trick I could think of to distract him while I charged up for an energy blast using my quirk. Note that this was after he crushed my throat and snapped my neck, forcing me to regenerate, causing me to fight in a semi-delirious state due to my recent death. Holy shit. Shinsu's eyes widened. Seriously, what the hell? Never been, but I've certainly come closer than anyone else currently alive. Death puns. Heroes aren't the only ones with interesting lives. Sometimes, just being unlucky can mean that you have to face off against a random crazy villain. Mind you, it might help to look up the relevant laws on quirk usage in regards to self-defense if that's the case. I shook my head. Regardless, you're where I am when I was 11. I'll teach you as many dirty tricks as I can so that you might have an advantage over whatever poor schmuck faces off against you in the festival. Alright? First rule of combat, anything can be a weapon as long as you hit hard enough with it. Saying that, I began to peel off my sock from my foot. And I do mean anything. What are you doing? Normally, you fill this with a bunch of rocks or coins. But in your case, I bet you'll have to grab some debris from anyone who makes a big enough mess with their quirk. Seriously, what are you doing? Grabbing several beanbags nearby and dropping them into the sock, I gave it a few test swings before throwing a wooden plank into the air. The air tore apart as I swung with all my might, and the plank shattered as it broke into 2 parts. Too slow and the plank will just fly across the room, I said to a stupefied Shinso. You need to swing fast and hard enough so that you can even break concrete. Although, I'm pretty sure you just need to hit hard enough to give your foe a broken nose. Wah, are you expecting me to copy that? You're a little too green for the Hatsu Ijima School of Fists Arts. So I'll have you practice this easy trick first before we move on to the hard stuff. This is easy? Yep, I beamed. Now, get to swinging. And peel your own damn sock. I'm not giving you one of mine. Shinso grumbled as he sat down to do as I say. For the first time since school started, I left campus with someone else. Shinso and I decided to meet up at a nearby park once classes ended on Friday. Since there was only a little over a week left to prepare for the sports festival, there was a sense of urgency to our training. Well, on his part at least. As for me, I was a bit more relaxed in comparison. There are 2 ways to learn how to fight in this world. I began when both of us found a spot. One teaches you how to defend yourself from an eager mugger or thug. The other shows you how to deal with murderous criminals and villains intent on taking your life. Today, I shall teach you the second. I started to stretch while I talked. Before the age of quirks, humans didn't become the most prosperous species on Earth by being the strongest or toughest. It was a combination of countless factors, all working together to accumulate experience and knowledge, passing it on from one generation to another. Our greatest gift as humans is that we reap the benefits of our predecessors' work without having to set the foundation first. Shinso was fixed onto every word, even as he began to mimic the same stretches as me. In the grand scale of things, humans have only existed for a few million years. Yet, during that time, we've endured countless tragedies. Natural disasters, war, genocide, plague, and even the initial emergence of quirks. Despite such trials, there is a reason why humans have been able to evolve and adapt to survive those incidents. Shinso couldn't help it, he spoke with curiosity. What's that? By being afraid. He blinked in surprise. That was definitely not the answer he was expecting. Next, I began to stretch my legs. I'm sure you heard the term fight or flight response before. Not just a saying, it is an evolutionary memory inscribed deep inside of us humans from our oldest ancestors. When placed in a situation of danger, our initial response is to feel fear. That's just a natural part of being alive. And yet, our bodies have learned to adapt to utilizing that fear to make us stronger. A memory of a show from my past life came to me, and I began to paraphrase it. In response to stress, the sudden release of hormones triggers a chain reaction of chemicals in our body. This concoction causes us to physically change as a result. Your heartbeat quickens, you start to breathe faster, your blood begins to pound. All of a sudden, you can now run faster and fight harder. You can jump higher and draw on strength as you have never done so before. And your mind is so alert, you can perceive everything around you as if time had slowed. I smiled. Danger incites anxiety. Anxiety can trigger fear. But fear can make us stronger. The one power every living being has. Fear is our superpower. Started. Turning to face him, I gave Shinso a serious look. To become a hero means facing fear daily, and to work alongside that fear while trying to save others. But just like a quirk, you have to learn to get used to fear. Thus, I'm going to teach you something that will help you act whenever you experience stress. Can you guess what it is? He took a few seconds to think about it. Some sort of technique? Shinso guessed. A mnemonic device to help trick ourselves into getting prepared to act? Most likely by forcing a situation where we feel like we're in danger, forcing us to trigger our fight or flight response? My eyes widened. Wow, that's actually pretty close to what we're about to do. Nice answer, but it's not exactly what I have in mind. So what exactly are you going to teach me then? The smile on my face turned sinister. I'm going to teach you how to dodge. He blinked. Wait, what? Dodge? I made sure to miss on purpose, but only just barely. Shinso could barely react as something fast flew past his face and into the tree behind him. My hands revealed several more projectiles, and I held them up. Beanbags, I revealed. Almost as heavy as rocks, but not as hard or durable. But these will still hurt like hell if you don't dodge. His eyes widened as my arms began to wind up. Already, he was backing away as fast as we can. Let's make a game out of this. My smile grew wider. Get hit 3 times and you're out? Just give me a second T. Too late. It was as if meteors flew from my hands as they pierced through the air. Despite what I said, I made sure to only aim at the edges of his outline so that he could still have a chance at dodging. While Shinso managed to dodge the first 2, he accidentally moved in front of another bag's flight path and was hit directly in the shoulder. Gah! Now, I ignored his cry of pain. That was only using 30% of my strength. Since you've been hit once, I'm going to bump that up to 50 now. Hopefully, this will motivate you to see the danger of this better. You bastard! No need for such language. Just remember that in real life, talking is not a free action. What's that supposed T-O-W? It means keep dodging. Gah? I've never seen such hateful eyes directed at me before. Did you seriously have to start juggling while you threw more at me? Honestly, I was just surprised that you let me throw them at you in the first place, I admitted. After all, I never said that you couldn't just try and stop me. You didn't even have to use your quirk, you could have just charged at me. Heck, if you really want to be technical, you could have just started running away. That would have been considered dodging after all. Shinso just stared at me for a few seconds. You have no idea how much I want to strangle you right now. Hey, despite the schadenfreude of this entire session, there is a benefit to this type of training. I gathered the rest of the beanbags. But really, I sort of know about your goal of transferring into the hero course. But didn't you try to learn any kind of fighting technique before applying to UA? I mostly concentrated on improving my fitness. Well, that does help. Despite the training, Shinso was still able to last pretty long before succumbing to exhaustion. Hardware-wise, you're up to standard. We just need to help you develop your software. Now, let's go over your strengths and weaknesses. Any input? I suck. Gotta be more specific than that. Physically, you're not that much inferior to the hero students. I held up a hand before he could argue. Seriously, you're probably equal to their class average. Maybe a bit less if we're being cautious. You're a bundle of encouragement, aren't you? But a stumbling first step is still not much. You need to train in one aspect and specialize in that since you're so far behind everyone else and you only have 1 week left. And I don't know how to train your quirk. Don't worry, he interrupted. I can handle that part on my own. Suit yourself? I shrugged. If we're focusing on just the sports festival, 9 out of 10 times there's most likely going to be a tournament portion. Your biggest opposition will be the ones that will try and play smart with you since your quirk is more of a hidden trump card that loses effectiveness when the opponent knows it. Yeah, I already know that. There's not enough time to work on your fighting techniques, I continued. It's the height of lunacy to expect someone to improve in only a week. The only thing left is to build up your foundations now, and to give you as much experience as you can before the sports festival. That's the only method I can think of right now to help you anyway. I sighed. I'm going to be honest, you'll only go far based on how lucky you get. Without your trump card, most anyone with a strong quirk will instantly take you out. Gee, thanks. So we are going to work on moves that will give you more chances to one-up your opponent, I finished. Dodging, evading, stalling, stuff like that. In your case, you'll still mostly rely on your quirk, am I right? That's right, he nodded. As long as I can get them under my control, I can easily win a tournament match. A thought crossed my mind. Speaking of which, I never seen you use your quirk before. You haven't even used it on me during our spar. Why is that? Shinsu's face formed into a grimace. That, can I refuse to answer? Alright, forget it then. I didn't understand his problem. Since it's been over a dozen years since I last encountered the series, my knowledge of miscellaneous things was basically non-existent. I didn't know anything about Shinso other than what his quirk did and his name. I barely understood his motivations other than his wish to transfer into the hero course. If he didn't want to answer, then there was nothing I could do to push him to change his mind. As such, there was no need to make him do so in the first place. My interest in him didn't extend that far. Can I ask you something? Shinso suddenly spoke. Last week you tried to step up for me. You got into a fight and even lost your phone in that incident? Yeah, I grumbled. I still haven't forgiven them for that. Those guys were just real jerks. I think so too. But that's not what I'm getting at here. He shook his head. I have to ask, why did you help me? Didn't you think that you could get hurt while getting involved with us? I couldn't understand why I paused. Shinso continued after a second. Without thinking, you stepped in to save me. Even though I'm the creepy villain kid with the brainwashing quirk. Those guys too, they only attacked me because of what I could do. The one involved was me, yet you chose to step in and involve yourself. He clenched his fist. And your quirk, you told me the details. Except for when you die, you're basically quirkless in a fight. You said it yourself, you don't even want to be a hero. So why did you step in and help me? Maybe I was stupid, because the words Shinso was speaking didn't make sense to me. Was he trying to say that I risked myself for no reason? Sure, there was no knowing the danger of the situation when I stepped in. But why did I not think about that when I approached in the first place? I didn't care about myself when I stepped in. No, rather than a lack of caution, it simply didn't register to me that something bad could have happened to me. The concept of danger was as alien to me as the idea of me trying to become a hero. Was it a lack of self-preservation? No, I doubt that was it. I was still just a regular person who wanted to avoid pain and troublesome matters. So what was it? What answer was supposed to satisfy Shinso? I don't want to be a hero, I said the first thing that came to mind. But what does that have to do with not wanting to help others? Do heroes have to be the only people who want to help? Even villains probably have someone they want to help sometimes. Should my desire to help people only make sense on the basis that I have a powerful quirk or heroic intentions? If a person in front of me needs help, I have the choice to choose not to help. But I also have the choice to give out a hand. Rather than a special reason or anything, isn't the fact that I can help enough? Shinso stared at me. That doesn't make sense, he replied. No, there must be a reason why you helped me. You can't say you only helped me just because you were there. Why not? I honestly asked. There was no benefit in helping you, but I did so anyway because I wanted to. Why is that so hard to believe? Because nobody thinks like that. Really? I quirked an eyebrow. I don't help others to prove myself. I don't expect anything in return from those I help, because otherwise, that would simply make it quid pro quo. I'm pretty sure I don't do it for self-satisfaction, although I can't say for certain. No, I help because it is decent. I choose to help, however sparingly, because at that moment I think it is the right to do. He still looked like I was talking funny, and I gave out an annoyed sigh. Look, I don't go around saving everyone in sight. I'm not that selfless, I'm just a normal person. Can't you just write that incident off as a whim? Seemingly still lost in thought, I stood up and lightly nudged his leg. Shinso broke out of his thoughts and looked at me. All right, I think that's enough of a break. I tried to steer us back to training. You've worked on your dodging. So let's see what your attacking is like. This time, you throw the beanbags at me and I'll try to dodge. This caught his interest. You sure? Yeah, I smirked. Tell you what, if you can hit me even once, I'll treat you to some ice cream. Deal? At the very least, he didn't seem interested in bringing up the previous topic. And after a while, even I forgot about his words. Note, I'm also including Interlude 1 here so that I don't mess up the chapter count. Interlude 1 Thaizawa. He was too late. Several months ago, a call came in while he was patrolling. According to the police, they received a frantic call from a young middle school girl. The girl had informed them of another student who had brought a knife to school and was planning on stabbing someone. Even though he wasn't on duty, he was the closest available to respond at the time. Traveling as fast as he could, he entered the main building of Mitsuyo Middle School that day. Thus, Shoyuda Izawa came upon a grisly sight, and his face fell when he realized that there was nothing he could do. He stares at the young girl lying on the ground, her pale skin and white hair contrasting with the red seeping into her clothes. From the looks of it, she seemed to at least try to apply pressure to the injury. But it must have been several minutes since she was injured, and the wound was too severe. She was still alive, but only barely. Izawa moved next to her, and he saw her eyes briefly open before turning in his direction. "Ah," she rasped. "So I'm not dying alone. That's a small relief." "Stay steady," he commanded. "Don't fall asleep, eyes on me. An ambulance is already on the way." "That's nice," she chuckled. "But you and I both know that they won't get here in time." The look of resignation on her face made him want to scream. Why was she so accepting of her situation? Why couldn't he have been here faster? Why did he have to watch as someone before his eyes died without being unable to do anything? "I truly am lucky." His thoughts were interrupted when the girl spoke again. At least this time, a hero finally came when someone called. Glad this wasn't a repeat of the first 2 times. He ignored her nonsensical words. "Keep your eyes open. It's almost time. You're not dying on me." He raised his voice. "Don't give up yet." Her hand intertwined with his own without him noticing, and he felt her grip tighten. "Please," she begged. "Whoever's going to come after me, they're going to be so afraid. When I'm gone, look after them. Them? Promise me." Her eyes stared into his. "Please help them." He couldn't comprehend what she was asking, but he knew better than to ignore one's final words. "I give you my word." She finally smiled. "Thank you." To his horror, she started to move. "What are you doing? Why are you trying to stand?" "Because I don't want to die lying down, isn't that obvious?" She pushed his arm away when he tried to stop her. "And anyway, I'm going to do something now. It would really help if you keep watch over me while I'm doing this." "And what are you doing exactly?" "Just trust me. You'll forgive me if I don't wish for you to act recklessly based solely on the fact that you asked me to trust you." She staggered to her feet. "I'm going to be using my quirk to save myself." "Your quirk?" He blinked in surprise. "Does your quirk allow you to heal yourself?" "Yes." "Unfortunately, I have to die first." His eyes widened. "What?" "Don't worry, it's part of my quirk. Dying. I hope I turn out ginger again." She started to ignore him. "Miss that old look from my first time around." "Well, in this life at least." "What are you talking about?" "It is my duty to care," she muttered. "To pass on the torch when I can no longer go on. As the last ember dies, it becomes the spark to light the next flame." Her hands began to glow. "Well, no time like the present. You might want to stand back now." Not knowing what was going on, Izawa decided that it might be wise to listen and back away. The girl's hands continued to glow brighter as she stood resolute. "Goodbye, me." She smiled. "And hello to whoever comes next." Suddenly, the area exploded with golden light. And that was how he first met Hatsu Iijima. Over the next few months, Izawa finally began to realize the significance behind the promise he made. Hatsu was a traumatized boy who, according to his friends and family, was dealt an unlucky hand in life. A child loved by death, blessed and cursed with a quirk that allowed them to cheat it with a condition. As a consequence of his job, Izawa was used to the fact that sometimes it wasn't always possible to save everyone. The death of those victims he couldn't save would always weigh on his soul, their memories acting as motivation to always try to do better the next time. Seeing a walking, talking reminder of one of such victim wearing a different face was something that took time getting used to. Walking down the corridors of UA, he found himself in front of the doors leading to one of the branch nurses' offices normally inaccessible to students. Opening the doors, Recovery Girl glanced at him before speaking. "Oh, you're finally here." She gave him a curt nod. "Go down the hall. It's the room on the right." "All Might is here already?" "It's the room on the right," Recovery Girl repeated. "He wants to speak with you." Izawa walked past her and entered the room he was directed to. Waiting inside for him was the gaunt form of his fellow teacher sitting on the couch. The man himself was busy staring at something, a folder with several papers sprawled across the table. It was only when Aizawa closed the door did All Might look up. Eraserhead. Good to see you. All Might gestured across the table. Come, sit down. We have a lot to talk about. He glanced at the papers on the table and immediately understood what this was about. Sighing, he sat down and gave All Might a look. Why are you looking into Ijima-kun? All Might blinked. So you do know him. Nizu said you would, but he didn't bother explaining the extent of your relationship. Answer my question. I want to know what exactly his quirk is, All Might replied. A few days ago he did something. I'm not sure exactly on the specifics, but he was able to somewhat heal me using his quirk. Aizawa's body went still. He said something about looking up his name in the registry to access his medical records. I assume that they have something to do with his healing quirk. But when I asked Nizu to help me look up his student information, he said to talk to you first before going into further research. That said, I did manage to find a few references to his name online. Something to do with an incident with a villain attack that occurred a few years ago. Stop, Aizawa interrupted. Let me make sense of this. You said that he healed you? Why yes. All Might blinked. Yet, according to his records, his quirk is listed as regeneration. I'm not sure whether this is an undiscovered aspect of his quirk that recently revealed itself, or simply a case of not updating his records. But to think that such a young man has a remarkable healing quirk. He doesn't. Excuse me? He doesn't have a healing quirk. His quirk isn't meant to heal others, only himself. Are you sure? All Might asked. Because he definitely helped take the edge off of my injuries. It's not that he can't heal others, Aizawa continued. Although, I'm not certain about that either. No, it's the fact that he is not supposed to use his quirk for anyone but himself. But why? Because it's detrimental to himself, Aizawa answered. Let me explain what I know about his quirk. His quirk relies on the accumulation of a form of energy that he dubs regeneration energy. For the most part, his quirk remains dormant except whenever he needs to tap into this energy, which gives him the ability to repair his body whenever it is heavily damaged. So, young Ijima-kun used this regeneration energy to heal me? I believe so, Aizawa nodded. But the problem is that he has a limited energy pool he can access. You can think of it as an alternate type of life force for him, with how vital it is to his body. Restoring his life force is not a simple matter as recovering after a good night of sleep, although I'm unfamiliar with the exact specifics. Finally, All Might understood the gravity of the situation. Then his act of healing me was filled with good intentions, but possibly harmful on his part. Aizawa sighed. I think it would be best that we warn him from repeating such a thing until we know for certain how dangerous it is to him. If he goes around trying to heal others and exhausts the rest of his energy. I understand. All Might nodded. I was meaning to thank him for helping me. After all, even Recovery Girl was shocked by how effectively young Ijima-kun was able to fix with his abilities. But if you truly believe that what he is doing is dangerous, I shall do my best to warn him of the potential dangers. Good. It's a shame though, All Might continued. With how he immediately moved to help me, I assumed that he would have made for a remarkable hero. I used to think so too, Aizawa agreed. The boy has a brilliant mind and training in physical matters. His quirk aside, he has all the makings of a hero department student save for one thing, and that is his mentality, Aizawa answered. Hatsu Ijima has absolutely no desire to become a pro-hero. He would know after all. During the days after his encounter with Himiko Toga, Aizawa was one of the first to discuss what happened with Ijima. The boy had given a concise report about the encounter with the villain, but what truly caught Aizawa's interest was what Ijima said immediately after he finished his recount. I knew that she disguised herself as a student from my school. Ijima fidgeted while he sat on the hospital bed. But I had no idea that she was planning on attacking me. Aizawa raised a brow. And how did you discover that she was not who she appeared to be? Master/Stranger Protocols ***, Ijima answered. They're a list of general rules that I keep in mind when dealing with quirks that impersonate other people. Comparing general habits and behavior to the target, asking bizarre questions that take into account what the intended recipient normally answers, making references to things only a student of my school would know. I wasn't suspicious of her at first, since her disguise was really good. If it wasn't for the fact that I knew the person she was disguised as still had a club meetup after school, she could have completely tricked me. Once I noticed the discrepancy, I made sure to subtly check whether she knew information that any Mitsuyo student should have been aware of. His face fell. Too bad she attacked me before I could escape. You weren't expecting an attack? Not at all, Ijima shook his head. I still have no idea why she targeted me. At first, I thought it was a random act. But why would she target me while I was still at school? It doesn't make sense. While his methods were a bit amateurish, Aizawa was impressed with him at the time. With further training, could that day's events have been prevented? At least, that was what he thought back then. Unfortunately, when Aizawa made an offer to Ijima to apply for UA with his name as a reference, he was refused. I'm sorry, but... Ijima exhaled deeply. I'm not sure whether I'm suited for the hero path. Or rather, I don't really want to become one. His face turned complicated. Thank you, Eraserhead. I'm glad that you think highly of me, but I'm afraid my answer is no. Aizawa shook his head. Regardless, make sure to warn him not to use his regeneration energy anymore unless it is for himself. He stood up. As for your injuries, I'm glad to hear that they're better now. But if that is all, then I shall take my leave here. If you say so, All Might nodded. I still need to meet with Detective Tsukachi later to talk about the recent incident. With the sports festival coming up, we'll have to prepare better security in case the villains attack once again. It's a miracle that word hasn't spread of their attack already. If it weren't for that warning we received that day, both of them frowned. Danger may still lurk around the corner, All Might continued. And it is our duty to prepare for the worst. Agreed, Aizawa nodded. I'll see about contacting a few heroes to act as security for the festival. The problem will be doing so without drawing any attention from the media that something might be wrong. Hopefully, the festival will remain undisturbed. I feel a great swell of pity for the poor soul who comes to my school looking for trouble. There was only one day left until the sports festival. Shinso and I were back at Kyotaro-sensei's dojo. I was able to borrow a large enough room for the two of us to use since it was a necessary requirement for Shinsu's next step in training. A ball shot out of a modified tennis ball cannon, and Shinso jumped to the side as it sped past him. Still, the ball bounced off of the wall and flew in his direction. Again, he dodged at the last second, this time without even looking. Several more balls shot out, and soon, the entire room was a chaotic mess of tennis balls flying around everywhere. Shinso jumped, ducked, lunged, and flew under the assault of dozens of projectiles. At his current level, it was less about keeping track of the ball's trajectories and more about relying on honing his instincts to avoid the incoming danger. Still, that didn't mean the current exercise was easy for him. Dodge. I threw a fastball aimed at his chest. He turned his body to avoid it but was unable to evade the second ball I threw with my other hand. Smacking him straight in the head, he stumbled before several other balls managed to hit him all at once while he was distracted. Damn it. Fuck. I gave a solemn nod. Clearly, it has once again been proven that the tennis ball is indeed a formidable foe. He groaned painfully while lying on the ground. I think I prefer the beanbags. Better tennis balls than fireballs or laser beams. I turned off the machine and began to clean up the floor. Always keep a distance, dodge any ranged attacks, activate your quirk. That's the simplest strategy you can employ in the festival if you want to succeed. Is that why you haven't taught me any fighting techniques? I rolled my eyes. Like I said before, exactly what kind of technique do you think you'll learn in less than a few days? Kyotaro-sensei knows more about that than me, and he's already teaching you the basics. Besides, until you complete stage 2 of your training, you aren't ready for the more advanced stuff. When you say more advanced, all I hear is more painful. There is a noticeable causality between the two. That caused Shinso to loudly groan again. Still, he eventually stood up to help clean the area. Within a few minutes, the room was clear of all objects as the two dumped the gathered tennis balls into a nearby basket. Seeing that we were done, I took a seat against the wall and began to relax. After a few minutes, Shinso fell into line next to me. His voice faltered. I appreciate your help these past few days. You didn't have to, but I'm grateful that you did. No problem. He was silent for a moment. It's just that I never really got the opportunity to improve myself before. Not like this. This may be my only chance to achieve my goal of transferring into the hero department. I turned to face him. This really means a lot to you, doesn't it? Yes, he answered. During the entrance exam, all I could feel was despair when I realized that there was nothing I could do with my quirk. It never occurred to me that I might have to rely on myself instead of just my quirk. At the time, I just blamed it on bad luck. Or I used the excuse that the school favored those with big and powerful quirks instead of those like mine. You're not wrong though. No, Shinso agreed. But that doesn't mean that I deserve to get in. Before, I thought I had done everything I could to prepare for the exam. But how well did I truly do so? I never thought about training to fight without my quirk. I never thought about seeing if there were other areas I could improve in. You were still at a disadvantage. I was and I still am. He sighed. But real life doesn't care whether I'm at an advantage or disadvantage, and that's where you learn whether you're actually any good or not. If I want to be a hero, I have to be better. He grew silent, and I eventually spoke. You're pretty good at dodging now, at least. Shinso cracked a smile. I had to if I didn't want my entire body to be ridiculed with bruises. His smile faded. Hey, I want to apologize. I was wrong about you. Whatever he wanted to say was interrupted by the sound of my new phone chiming, indicating that I received a new text. Pulling it out, I glanced at the notification and my eyes widened. Unknown, payment confirmed, attached. Ingenium Patrol Route Report. I have to go. I quickly stood up, startling Shinso next to me. Sorry, but there's an emergency. Tell Kyotaro-sensei that we're done here for today. I'll see you tomorrow. But I was already gone. Confession time, I had no plan for how to stop Stain. I know, pretty careless on my part, but what exactly could I do? It was easy to warn UA about the attack due to how I was able to reveal that I knew about the USJ event. That wasn't exactly public knowledge, so it was still some small form of credibility on my part when I warned them about the incoming attack. But how was I supposed to explain that Stain was probably going to attack Ingenium? As far as I knew, the event might not even happen due to the ripple effect caused by my recent actions. Without any guarantee, and the fact that I was going to be busy with the sports festival, what was the best way to prevent a tragedy from happening? Thoughts like these plagued me as I boarded the train to Hosu. Well, if I wanted to go full-on vigilante, I could always hunt Stain myself. All 100+ pounds of me, versus a trained serial killer who has managed to take out dozens of heroes by himself using nothing but a minor quirk and his sword. And the only weapon I had was my limbs and socks. Yeah, let's table that thought and call it a definite Plan Z. Still, although I didn't have a plan to stop Stain, I did have a plan involving Ingenium. Several plans? Less than plans and more like ideas? And it wasn't really a good plan either. More like an oh, sweet heavens please let this work kind of plan. Basically, the main idea behind my plans centered on the idea of Ingenium not being in Hosu tomorrow. How was I supposed to do that? Well, my idea of ambushing him on patrol and telling him that I have a premonition quirk was definitely not going to cut it. Neither was my plan of breaking his leg so that he would not be able to patrol for the foreseeable future. Worst comes to worst, there was one last idea that I have in mind. Admittingly, it is a fairly terrible plan. One that involves scalpers, drama, a few white lies, and potential intervention in familial affairs. This was either going to work out perfectly or blow up spectacularly in my face. There is no middle ground. On the bright side where everything goes well, then that might mean that Ida might not try to go after Stain in his vengeance quest. The downside though, really, I just recently bought a new phone too. My wallet is going to be so empty after this. With that said, I pulled out my phone and began scrolling through my school website for its contact page. Finding the phone number I was looking for, I began to make my call. Hello, is this the business department student line? I was wondering if there were still any tickets left to purchase for the festival tomorrow. I know it's a bit last minute, but maybe you can direct me to someone I can talk to? 1 hour later, I exited the train with tears running down my face and a digital receipt for a spectator ticket to the sports festival. Damn scalpers, those people are worse than villains in my mind. At least villains had the courtesy to just try and kill you. Scalpers are vultures who make you give up an arm and a leg to purchase one of their products. And now I finally understand why my mother was glad I never developed an interest in the business courses at UA. Opening the file containing Ingenium's patrol schedule, I began walking towards the location where he was supposed to be at this time of day. Hosa City was not a place I knew well enough to navigate, even with a map of notable landmarks and places. With the recent cases of hero deaths due to stain, there was a slight air of tension I felt while walking amongst the crowd. In my case, I wasn't particularly worried. Sure, the situation with the dying heroes was bad. But realistically, I couldn't do anything about them. I didn't know the situation, not as well as the pro-heroes involved in the stain investigation. The only thing I could reasonably contribute to was helping prevent Ingenium from being paralyzed. Any concerns that this would affect the future I knew about were second to that. Finally, I spotted him. "Excuse me." Calling out to the armored hero, Ingenium turned in my direction as I ran towards him. "Oh, hello there, citizen. Is there something you need? Nice to meet you." I gave him a quick bow. "My name is Hatsu Ijima. I'm a student at UA High School." "Huh, is that so?" "The truth is," and I began to put on my best concerned look. "You see, I have this friend in Class 1A. And recently, one of his classmates named Midoriya asked him for advice about how to cheer up another friend of his." Sorry. Is this story going anywhere?" "I'm getting to that. See, my friend's friend Midoriya is worried about your brother, Tenya Ida." "Really?" Now, I finally caught his attention. "Is there something wrong?" "My friend's friend," I almost bit my lip saying that. "Midoriya thinks that he's worried about his performance tomorrow in the upcoming sports festival. They think that the stress is getting to him about how well he is going to perform." "Tenya is worried?" Ingenium took off his helmet after saying that. "I didn't notice the last time I called him." I gave out a nervous laugh. "Well, anyway, my friend came up with this plan on how he and Midoriya could cheer him up. He sent me a ticket he bought to see if you could spectate and cheer on your brother tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" He blinked in surprise. "I'm not sure if I have the time. Please." I bowed once more. "It would mean a lot to your brother if you could watch him perform tomorrow. Surely you can take off one day just to watch, can't you?" Well, nervously, I watched as he looked like he was thinking about it. This entire situation was already difficult to predict, especially since I was pretty much lying straight to his face. Even so, it didn't matter whether or not what I told him was the truth. As long as he believed it enough to be convinced of taking the day off tomorrow, all of this would be worth it. "Please make this worth it." His words made me nervous once more. While it is true that my work is keeping me busy, I suppose it can't hurt to just take one day off to support Tenya. Since my agency primarily emphasizes teamwork, there are plenty of people in my staff capable of holding the line while I'm gone. If I explain things to them, I'm sure they'll understand. "You're saying?" "Sure." He gave me a bright smile. "I'll go to the festival." A huge wave of relief washed over me. "Thank you so much." I pulled out my phone. "This is great. If you can, I can transfer you the ticket right now." "Oh, that's not necessary." He waved me off. "Since I'm a pro hero, I can just ask one of the staff members to let me register as one of the scouts interested in looking for interns. There's no need for me to have a ticket." I froze at those words. "What?" "Come on," he said while chuckling. "Do you know how many heroes visit during these kinds of events? There are plenty of situations where a last-minute rescheduling happens and a hero suddenly decides to leave or watch. I'll just call them after my patrol and spectate with the rest of the heroes." My face must have alarmed him because he suddenly gave me panicked looks as I dropped to my knees in despair. "Damn you, scalpers." The air was tense in the waiting room. It was weird wearing my gym clothes without a vest underneath. I kept trying to pat at my chest for something that wasn't there, the familiar weight missing since I didn't want anything to hinder myself today. All of the students of Class 1C were nervously awaiting the event to begin, including Shinso and me. Even though I didn't have any expectations of standing out, I was still going to be performing in front of hundreds of people. The thought alone was frightening enough, and that didn't even take into account the fact that this was a televised event as well. Begone, nerves. You shall not take me. All right, time to embarrass ourselves on live national television. My raised hand slowly fell as I realized what I just said. Man, this really is every introvert's worst nightmare, isn't it? Shinsu's already pale face grew worse at my words, and the heavy bags under his eyes probably didn't help either. This is my chance. This is my chance. He kept muttering those words like some kind of mantra, and it was sort of freaking me out. This is my chance at transferring into the hero department. Did you not get a wink of sleep last night? No, Shinso confessed. I was too busy planning on how I would stand out today. I wanted to make sure that my performance would be good enough to draw the attention of the teachers and heroes. So I stayed up all night researching the past festivals to guess at what kind of events we might do today. Haven't you ever heard of putting the cart before the horse? I asked. That kind of defeats the purpose of preparing for the festival. I know that now. He scowled. Whatever, I was never good at relaxing anyways. Can you two keep it down? A voice shouted at us from the side, and I looked up to see that it was Blondie who spoke. It's not like any of us are going to do well today. We're just here to act as compliments to those hero students. The amount of vitriol in his words surprised me, especially with how he delivered them in a bitter tone. While I didn't know Blondie very well, I wasn't expecting him to be so resigned to the situation. And a quick glance around the room showed that he wasn't the only one either. Not knowing what else to do, I spoke up. Is everyone here in low spirits? Why do I get the feeling that everyone has already given up? You don't get it? Another student spoke up. Even though we all have quirks, we're just regular students. Compared to those training to be heroes, there's such a wide gap between our skill levels that there's almost no chance of us winning. Does it say something about me that I didn't know the name of the person who spoke just now? Now that I'm thinking about it, I was pretty sure that I only knew Shinso by name out of everyone in my class. He was still talking. The only ones who will move on to the next round will just be hero students. I mean, I hesitated. We could all team up for the first event or something if you guys really want to beat the hero students. I doubt that's going to be allowed, Shinso replied. Besides, why would we need to team up? Because, I gestured around us. If we're just planning on giving up already, then what's the point of participating in the first place? If our class needs a goal to drive us to do better, then why not have everyone prove we're not just extras in this school? That we're not inferior to those hero students? My rousing words fell on deaf ears. Shinso sighed. I guess, but I doubt the rest of our classmates will feel like going with that plan. We just need some motivation, I grumbled. No, I was getting distracted. The problem was that everyone here was completely unmotivated, and the mood was starting to affect Shinso. Even though he was socially removed from them in many ways, Shinso still saw himself as a part of this class. If everyone around him believed that there was no chance they could win, what hope did he have compared to all of his classmates? Really, this entire class was a mess in a lot of ways, the two of us included. A knock on the door signaled to us, and we were told to head outside for the festival to begin. Good luck, everyone. I tried giving a last-minute encouragement. Plus Ultra and all that. Everyone just walked out lethargically together. I gave out a sigh and resigned myself to following them. The light almost blinded me as I stepped out into the stadium. Present Mick's voice rang out as he announced our arrival. And next up, General Studies classes C, D, and E. While not as loud when the hero classes appeared, the cheers were still staggering. The sheer pressure resounding from the volume alone almost knocked me off my feet. The atmosphere was infectious, and my heart started pumping harder in response. There were cameras mounted on various spots surrounding us, and I knew that they were broadcasting the events across the country. Even though I knew logically that there was a low chance that they would signal me out from the crowd, I still grew nervous just from the knowledge that I was being filmed. Only now did I realize how big of an event this was, and that realization only made the situation all the more nerve-wracking. Now for the athlete's oath. Midnight snapped her whip in the air as she addressed the students. Coming up is the student representative from Class 1A, Katsuki Bakugo. I could already hear the murmurs from my classmates. Bakugo stood in front of the microphone, the crowd quieting so that he could speak. He opened his mouth. "Make no mistake, I'm going to take first place." It was like an explosion went off, and the reaction was instantaneous. Suddenly, everyone around me started crying out to him in outrage, the earlier mood replaced by a wave of anger and indignation. Even Shinsu's eyes were filled with determination, a far cry from what they were before. If anything, at least Bakugo was good for raising morale, even if that was not exactly what he intended. Rather, it was more accurate to say he was a natural at stirring up resentment. "Hatsu." Shinsu's voice suddenly spoke from next to me. I wasn't going to say anything at first. "But you heard what he said, didn't you?" "Yeah," I replied uncertainly. Where was he going with this? I was planning on not holding back against anyone, even you. I thought that I just needed to prove that I was better than what everyone else thought. Something in his voice changed. But today, I realized that wasn't enough. It's not just about me, but how the rest of us are being treated. I blinked in surprise. Wait, what? When I turned to face him, I almost drew back in surprise at how he looked at that moment. "I'm sorry, Hatsu. But I'm going to be counting on you for this next part." For some reason, those words made me nervous. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? What happened next was something I could have never predicted. Shinso moved until he stood in front of the rest of our classmates, only waiting until all of their attention was on him before he spoke. "Oi, you idiots! You heard what he said, right? You've all been complaining about how we're not as strong or experienced as those hero students. I bet all of you are thinking how unfair it is that UA is treating us today compared to them." Shinso clenched his fist. And while that spiky-haired guy's words didn't help, I'm sure the rest of the hero students are thinking exactly like him. The way they look down on us, it's infuriating. He closed his eyes, and everyone was watching him silently. Now let me ask, are you guys just going to accept that? There was a beat of silence, and our class erupted. Hell no. We will crush those hero students. Don't think those guys can just look down on you. General students, unite. What the heck? No, really, what the devil just happened? Did Shinso suddenly awaken to a new aspect of his quirk that made him a natural instigator or something? Nearby, the other non-hero students also began to join us in the strange hype. US support students won't lose either. Neither will Class D and E. Those damn heroes are going down. Go beyond. Shinso raised a fist and yelled at the top of his lungs, "Plus Ultra. Hurrah." I almost forgot for a second exactly what world I've been reborn in, but only now did I suddenly remember that this was a shounen story. The fact that it was Shinso of all people who started this was a surprise. Seriously, this entire situation was nonsense. As the cheers began to die, Shinso turned to face me once again. "Alright, I've gained the cooperation of everyone, just like you said. So, what's the next plan?" Gained? My eyes widened as I realized what he was referring to. The throwaway words I said to him earlier were somehow the catalyst to his sudden shift in behavior. Somehow taking what I said to heart, Shinso roused the rest of the non-hero students into somehow banding together all in opposition to the hero department classes. And now, he was looking at me as if I had any clue what we were supposed to do now. What the heck, Shinso? Plan? I felt everyone's eyes on me. I totally got one of those. Their expectant gazes were hurting me. Why in the absolute hell did Shinso think I knew what I was doing? Fuck it, I'm all about causing chaos if it makes things more interesting. Gathering my confidence, I spoke with conviction. Alright, everyone listen up. Those hero students aren't even bothering to pay attention to us right now, so I'll be brief. This will be a competition of speed. The hero department students will be underestimating us, so I think we should come at them with our full strength from the start. Dozens of heads nodded in response. I gestured to several of us. Obviously, the majority of us aren't a match against the hero students, especially those who can easily throw out big and powerful quirks without warning. So to distract them, we'll send a small elite team to take the lead while the rest of us move on. Those with confidence in their running ability should join this group. Anyone with speed or leg quirks should volunteer right now if you think you can handle this. A grin appeared on my face. And while they take the lead, they'll be attacking the rest of the hero students who try to barrage us with their quirks. Use whatever you can, sand, dirt, debris, even your shoes if it comes to it. Just fight back as much as you can so that as many of us can get past them while they're distracted. Even better if you guys can create enough dust to obscure their vision. I see, Shinso said. So this lead team will work on protecting the rest of us while giving us a chance to go on ahead. Meanwhile, even if our numbers whittle down, as long as a couple of us make it to the end of the race, it will still be our victory so long as enough of us make it. That makes sense, Blondie added. I'm fine with being part of the cannon fodder group as long as anyone in the general department makes it to the end. I'm guessing that means most of us are going to act as meat shields, right? I nodded. So really there will be 3 teams. One lead team to distract, one main group that makes up the majority, and the small few that will actually make it to the end. Really, this was meant to give the illusion of intimidation by using our numbers to our advantage. After all, our numbers outnumbered the hero department students almost 3-1. In any case, I faced everyone with a hard look. The goal is to reach the finish line as fast as possible before the hero students can stop us. Now, all we need to do is figure out who is going to be part of the last group. As we began to collectively plot together how everyone could get a leg over the rest of the hero core students, the smile on Shinsu's face sent a shiver down my spine. The malicious look on his face only grew worse when we finally decided on a team. You would think we were plotting murder by the conspiring look on all of our faces, when the reality was that we were just planning on teaming up against 2 classes who were just minding their businesses. Seriously, what the actual fuck was my life now? Yumi Utsuka sat down in the audience seating and watched with a bored look on her face. Dressed in casual clothes instead of her school uniform, she waited impatiently for the waiting period to quickly pass so that the events could finally begin. Not that she was particularly interested in the tournament scene. Her view on heroics was neutral at best, and she certainly wasn't fond of the celebrity aspect of heroes. Considering that there were better things she could be doing than watching some freshman sports festival, the fact was that it was only because Hatsu invited her here that she bothered attending. After all, it would have been a waste to throw away the event ticket he sent her just because she wasn't interested. At the very least, she could keep an eye on any students with eye-catching quirks while she was here. Still, the loud cheering of the crowd was somewhat refreshing. Since this was the first time she ever went to a UA sports festival in person, it was interesting comparing the experience with watching from live television. There was some commotion going on amongst the students, and Yumi turned to see if she could spot Hatsu out of them all. Deep down, she was slightly worried at how well he would do since he was effectively quirkless unless dying at a given moment. Still, I guess that idiot wouldn't think of it as a handicap at all, Yumi thought to herself. In fact, I should probably be more worried about that friend of his. Unlike Hatsu, the purple-haired friend he recently befriended didn't have the same kind of training Hatsu did. 2 weeks of self-defense classes were never going to give him an overt advantage in an event like this. And while Yumi didn't know the exact specifics of his quirk, thanks to Hatsu keeping quiet about it, she figured that it was something that wasn't noticeably obvious or flashy like most heroic quirks. The first event this year will be the obstacle course race. Pro Hero Midnight's voice echoed through the speakers. Racers will now be gathering at the entrance to compete in this 4-kilometer course. Please give them a big round of applause. Knowing how over the top this school usually did things in past events, Yumi sighed and began to once again worry about her friend. Staring at the gathering of students, Yumi began looking for where Hatsu and his class were. As far as she knew, the general students of UA weren't exactly known for their success in past festivals. If things went well today, then maybe 1 or 2 of them would move on to the next round. That was normal. After all, compared to the hero students who have been training for who knows how long before enrolling, they were just regular kids. Instead, the sight that greeted her made her doubt her eyes. Huh, are those really ordinary students? Even though they were just standing still, the intimidating air radiating from the several dozen students even overshadowed that of the hero students for a moment. This wasn't like they were preparing for a regular school event, but as if they were all about to head to war. With the exception of the hero core students, every other student was staring ahead of them with determined faces and intense looks in their eyes. What the actual hell? Even Hatsu, despite the resigned look on his face, seemed to be prepared in his own way by seriously stretching and preparing to bolt at any second. Standing next to him was his friend Shinso, who was burning a hole into the student in front of him with how focused his eyes were. What was with this overwhelming fighting spirit they were all emitting? Certainly, this was all because of the words of a certain explosive blonde boy, but Yumi did not have the context to connect this scene to his previous speech spoken just a few minutes earlier. The bizarre situation was only broken when Midnight shouted out the announcement for the event to start. Yumi expected things to go wrong immediately. With how tightly packaged all of the students were into a confined space, it should have been obvious that chaos would ensue as students moved through the narrow gate. Yet somehow, as soon as the match starting signal came out, the majority of the students moved together as a group as they all began charging straight forward with incredible coordination. Those that did not match their rhythm were suddenly caught off guard as the large body of students marched forward as one. All of them roared as they charged. The last-minute coalition of students formed into separate groups, one to protect them from attacks and the other to distract other students. I was part of the second group. The objective of the task was to traverse an obstacle course while competing between all 11 classes. As specified, the students were allowed to do anything so long as they remained within the course. And of course, this meant that sabotage was allowed under these conditions. A figure shot ahead of the crowd, and I recognized that it was Todoroki before he used his quirk to attack us. A frigid wind blew as our feet were suddenly immobilized to the ground, stopping the majority of us in our tracks. Even knowing his quirk, I found myself trapped as well. Luckily, I made a plan for this situation. Now, I turned around and yelled towards somebody. PSSSSSST. To everyone's surprise, the students were suddenly free as the ice keeping them down disappeared. Without hesitating, the large group took advantage of the situation and continued moving forward. Even if it was a competition between the classes, that did not mean that the students couldn't team up with each other. Thanks, I yelled out to my classmate, who was apparently able to transition between water states with his quirk. He gave me a thumbs up before his attention shifted to focus on the race. One may think that the winner of this game would be someone with a powerful quirk, but this was UA High School. Even if there were only a total of 2 hero classes per year, almost every student here had their own natural abilities, not just the hero students. There was a chance that a random student's quirk could act as a counter to another person's quirk. And in an event like this, where dozens of such students were clashing, nobody would know whether someone with a perfectly suited quirk for the situation would pop up out of nowhere to turn the situation around. That made both the tension and excitement far beyond the norm. I flinched as the sound of explosions and yells came from above me as several students from Class 1A flew overboard. Even though I was near the lead only a few seconds ago, immediately I fell to somewhere around 20th to 30th place as our group was quickly overtaken. Before any more could slip past us, I heard Shinso yell out a command from several meters behind me. "Dust this place." Several students next to me immediately reached to scoop up dirt from outside the course path and began throwing them into the air, causing a screen of dust to form and cover the area. Some of them had even started using their quirks to quickly spread the cloud until everyone's field of vision was obscured. This was only possible due to how the surroundings were set up beforehand for the event. I was the one who came up with the idea, but Shinso was the one to split our group into roles for executing the plan. Taking advantage of our environment, several students were tasked with specifically shooting up as much dust as possible to take away the enemy's sight. The enemy, in this case being the hero students. Even though our own field of vision was covered, the distraction caused by this was enough for us to enact a plan for several students to swiftly move ahead before the dust could clear up. Almost a dozen of us were able to make it out ahead without anyone stopping our way. And that was exactly the moment when something stepped in front of us and stopped our way. Oh my God! My eyes widened. Are those the villain robots from the entrance exams? They're massive. I never took the exam myself, so seeing them for the first time was almost inspiring in a way. As in, oh my gosh, we are all so dead kind of way. Group up. Shinso called out to the rest of us. Those who can go around them, move ahead. The rest of us will wait for an opportunity. Right? A loud, cheerful voice replied, and a pink-haired girl shot into the sky and vaulted over the large robots using some kind of support item. Several other students followed after her, leaving only a few of us behind. Our chance came when 2 students from Class 1A came to take out the zero-pointers. With Todoroki flash-freezing several at once and Yaoyorozu shooting them down with cannons of all things, a path opened up for us to move ahead. I stumbled to a stop as we found our second obstacle. Oh great! You wouldn't happen to have experience as a tightrope walker, do you? Shinso asked from right next to me. Nope, I replied before starting to untie one end of the rope. My brain began running the mental calculations for what I was about to do next. But I do have some experience with swinging. Grab on. Wait, what? Running to build up momentum, I grabbed Shinso right as my feet left the ground. Shinso gave out a loud scream as the 2 of us swooped through the air, my hand letting go of the rope only at the last second as we both barely managed to grab the edge of the next platform. I winced as I heard Shinso's face smack directly into the earthen object. The 2 of us pulled ourselves up before collapsing onto the ground, both of us breathing heavily. Ready for round 2? I asked. Hate you, Shinso mumbled with his face on the ground. Hate you so much right now. Does that mean you're good on your own? Just get the damn rope ready before I change my mind. Since some of the platforms were slightly uneven in terms of height, we had to choose our route carefully. Shinso began to copy me as we continued, learning to bend his knees and releasing at the optimal swing point to maximize our swinging. To be honest, it would have been less taxing on our muscles if we simply tried balancing our way across the tightrope. But since neither of us wanted to risk it on account of our less than stellar confidence in our ability to keep ourselves from plummeting to our deaths. You know, like normal people. On the bright side, we were able to make it past most of the students who were struggling to move across the canyon. The downside is we were stuck dealing with the minefield obstacle. Alright, it looks like the location of each mine is obvious if you pay attention. My eyes swept around us to analyze the competition. If we take our time, we can still finish in the top 20. Just good enough for the both of us to pass. Shinso nodded. Or what? We can have something else trigger the bombs so that we don't have to worry about it. After saying that, he scooped up a handful of dirt and began packing it together into a tight clump. A second later, he threw it as hard as he could towards the ground in front of us right where a mine was located, causing a spectacular explosion to occur. My jaws dropped in surprise, and Shinso smirked from right next to me. First rule of combat, anything can be a weapon as long as you hit hard enough with it. He gestured before us. Or, in our case, hold enough weight to trigger the traps so that we don't have to. Shinso, have I ever told you what a magnificent genius you are? You could stand to tell me more. The 2 of us grinned before we started scooping up as much dirt as we could. Luckily for us, the dirt was slightly moist from the faculty sprinkling water on the grounds beforehand to prevent sand from being kicked up to reveal the locations of the mines. This made it easier for us to form enough mud balls large enough to stockpile and hold using our shirts. As the 2 of us traversed the field, a loud explosion came from behind us, and I saw Midoriya fly across the field as both Bakugo and Todoroki both overtook us. Shinso's eyes widened. Is that guy crazy? Less talking, more throwing. He took his eyes off the flying boy and looked in front of him again. The 2 of us sped up, tossing our mud balls towards the ground, and it wasn't long until we were finally able to cross the field. There was our destination, several dozen meters in front of us. Already, 3 people were in the lead, not so far ahead. Both of us sprinted as hard as we could, the stadium cheers acting as background noise. At this point, we were competing with each other as we came close to the end. The 2 of us were only a few meters away. My foot snagged and I stumbled. Shinso overtook me. He passed the finish line. Shinso finished in 4th place. And I took 5th place right after him. My calves felt like they were going to explode, and I was breathing heavily with a palm pressed against my chest. Today has been a wild turn of events. Honestly, I wasn't expecting to place this high amongst my fellow competitors, especially given who I was competing with. But thinking hard, it was probably due to the other classes doing their best to get in the way of the hero students that led to this outcome. What about sportsmanship? Even I was surprised at the effectiveness of the sabotage, but no doubt that it came with a price. The cooperation of the general and support students in exchange for the animosity of the hero students. Anyone from the non-hero classes that made it through the first round was going to be on their radar now, especially since it was now a reversal of the first event. From the hero students being outnumbered by the other departments, the current participants consisted of majorly hero students. Knowing what the second event was going to be, there was no doubt in my mind that the only way to win now was to maintain this alliance between non-hero students. And it seems we have quite a few dark horses this year coming from the general department, with 2 of them even taking 4th and 5th place. From the commenters' booth, Present Mick's voice crackled through the speakers of the stadium. Eraserhead, as one of the homeroom teachers for the hero department, are you impressed with those 2 for surprising us all? More confused as to how they managed to cross the second obstacle, Eraserhead confessed. Basic pendulum physics states that you can't swing to a higher elevation than your starting height. Yet somehow, they were able to vault into the air long enough to jump to other areas by swinging consecutively from the sides of the platforms at impractical angles. I know, right? Their determination must have pushed them to new heights. Determination alone is not a reason for a person to violate the basic laws of thermodynamics, Eraserhead said in a deadpan voice. What they did is supposed to be scientifically impossible. That's plus ultra for you folks. Up on stage, Midnight began explaining the rules for the second event. As soon as she revealed the rules and how the points worked behind the headband, everyone turned to face Midoriya with stares of greed. I winced in sympathy for the poor kid and decided to give him a silent prayer that he would make it through this without much trouble. Then again, he was the main character. I should probably reserve that prayer for myself and Shinso rather than someone who was also going to be my opponent. Hopefully, I'll stay out of his radar the entire event while everyone else went after him. Since the point system was based on increments of 5 depending on which place you were, my 5th place position was worth 190 points, with Shinso being worth 5 more than me. Assuming the 2 of us teamed up, our headband would already be worth a minimum of 385 points. Yet, there was a possibility that he was planning on teaming up with someone else instead. Ugh, that was actually a thought that I couldn't dismiss. After all, he was the only person here who knew exactly what kind of quirk I had. Outside of a specific set of circumstances, I had no unique abilities that could help contribute to a team. And with his quirk, he could technically recruit whoever he wanted as long as he remained discreet. On the other hand, I did have the advantage of familiarity. As an acquaintance of his, the 2 of us could coordinate better than whoever he controlled. But again, it would also be easier to work with people who would listen to you unconditionally. And unless I was willing to subject myself to being mind-controlled, it would be simpler for him to just use his quirk to recruit better people. It hurts to admit, but I couldn't count on Shinso teaming up with me if that was the case. As I agonized over the thought, Shinso calmly walked up to me once Midnight finished speaking. Hey, do you want to team up with me? Yes, of course. Shinso, I knew I could count on you. Forgive my previous self for ever doubting your intentions. Startled by my outburst, it took him a few seconds to regain his calm. Alright, then, do we still need to recruit a few more people? I was thinking of gathering whoever managed to pass from the general and support departments. That's not a lot though, I pointed out. Barely half a dozen students passed if you include the 2 of us. Although, there was one who caught my eye. Nudging for Shinso to follow me, the 2 of us walked towards a pink-haired girl wearing several pieces of equipment all over her body. She turned to face us when we neared. Hi there. I raised my hand in greeting. Since we worked together earlier, are you interested in teaming up again? Oh. Hatsum lifted her goggles and stared at us. But what's in it for me, Mr. 4th and 5th places? Detention, I replied. You're a support department student, correct? That means that you're here to attract sponsors using your inventions and support items. That's correct, she nodded. Our purpose is to develop equipment that makes full use of a hero's quirk. Showing off my talents will help in attracting a big-name sponsor. What about Detnerat Asterisk? I asked. Surely you know about them, right? What if I said I could introduce you to one of their head staff? Known as one of the more famous lifestyle support manufacturer companies, it wasn't exactly a hero support company. But even still, an opportunity to work underneath them was something that would have any support department student drooling with desire. A bit unfair pulling the nepotism card, but I'm pretty confident my mother knew someone I could direct Hatsum to. After all, Detnerat was one of the companies studying my quirk to forward their push into the medical sector. At the very least, I could cash in a favor to introduce her to their support team. Sure enough, Hatsum's eyes widened at my words. Are you kidding? Her face practically touched mine from how close she was. You're not joking, right? Because if you are, I'll make sure that you regret it. Please tell me that you're not lying. I'm not joking, I gently pushed her away from me. So, do we have a deal? You got it, 5th place-san. 5th place? Nickname aside, that meant we had 3 members so far. Turning around, I blinked as I realized that Shinso was already talking to someone else. After finishing with his conversation, he came back with someone else in tow. It was Blondie. I got our final member. Shinso scowled. Despite his personality, I know that this guy at least has a good quirk. He'll be a good horse if anything. Oh my, Blondie grinned. But of course, someone would recognize my brilliance. With me in the team, we'll do well in the upcoming competition. I blinked. But aren't the two of you? We've decided to put aside our differences, Shinso interjected. Anyway, he agreed to work with us as one of our cavalries. Did we decide who is going to be rider yet? Not yet, I replied. But it's probably going to be between either you or Hatsum-san. After all, I was technically stronger than Shinso, at least according to the results of our physical exam. Plus, it would be best if he was able to concentrate if he needed to use his quirk. I'll be part of the cavalry, Hatsum answered. Since my tech can help better that way. 4th place Kun can be our rider instead. I have a name. You know? He sighed. Whatever, as long as we're clear. Hatsu, can I speak to you please? He gestured for me to follow him, and the two of us moved a small distance away from our teammates. Once we were far enough, he turned to face me. Look, the only ones who know my quirk so far are my classmates. I'm willing to tell our teammates since it will be hard to explain later when I use it in the round. But if possible, I still want to keep it as an ace in the hole as much as possible. I nodded. That might be a bit hard, but it should be possible if we only target the teams that are not in the spotlight. Also, he hesitated. About our last teammate, there's something I should tell you. Is there something we should worry about? Shinso shrugged his shoulders. Not really. We had a disagreement, but it was a small argument at best. The two of us mostly avoided each other after that. He shook his head. But the thing is, I know that he doesn't like me because of my quirk. Then why did he agree to team up with you? I asked in confusion. I don't know. I only asked him since I knew his quirk would be good and that he was in our class. But despite that, I don't really trust him. His suspicion was somewhat justified, but in my head, I didn't really feel the same way. I mean, sure it was true that it was hard to trust somebody that didn't trust you back. But since this was a team event, it wasn't as if we had any other choice. Yet you're still willing to have him on the team? That's right, Shinso nodded. But I don't want him or that other girl knowing the specific details of my quirk. So during the event, I'm going to be downplaying the full extent of what I can do. Act like there are multiple conditions I have to fulfill, that sort of thing. Why are you telling me this? I gave him a confused look. It's not like you've told me how your quirk works either. I only know that it has something to do with mind control. According to my memory, it mainly relied on a verbal response. But this was knowledge based on something I read about over a dozen years ago. As far as Shinso was concerned, there was no way I should have been able to know how his quirk worked. His face turned into a grimace. It wouldn't be fair, he muttered. I mean, I already know what your quirk does. That's strangely honorable of you. My eyes couldn't hide my surprise. I honestly didn't strike you as the type. Whatever. He scowled. Let's go meet up with the others and discuss our plans. Alright? Was I imagining it, or was Shinsu's face slightly red? Either it was a trick of the mind, or he was actually embarrassed. I had finally discovered a cute side to him, revealing that he wasn't just a moody porcupine of a teenager. Well, idle thoughts aside, he did make a point of revealing part of his hand without needing to. Guess he felt that he owed me after all the things I've done for him recently. Joining back with the others, Blondie was amiably talking with Hatsum about some kind of support item he was wearing around his waist. The two paused as we approached. "Oh, are you guys done talking?" Hatsum asked. "Yeah," Shinso replied. "What about the two of you?" I was just describing what my quirk was to Hatsum-san while she was figuring out which equipment would help in the next event, Blondie explained. "Speaking of which, I already sort of know what Shinsu-kuen's quirk does. But what about you, Ijima-kun? If I recall, it was something like regeneration?" "My quirk isn't really suited for this event," I confided. "So I'm not going to be as useful as you three except as another cavalry member." "That's all right," Hatsum replied. "My quirk isn't really that useful either. It only allows my eyes to see stuff better, so I mainly rely on my support gear." "Still better than me." A thought crossed my mind, and I turned to Blondie. "That's right, I still don't know what your quirk does." "Oh." Blondie smiled. "My quirk is called Naval Laser ***. I can shoot lasers from my navel, but any longer than a second will overuse my quirk." "Huh, why did that sound familiar? I feel like I heard about that quirk before." "Cool, so you'll be best as the front cavalry then?" See. He posed with fingers pointing at me. "I shall be a twinkling beacon that leads us to victory." "You do that," I nodded. "Alright, so let's make a plan. Shinso, do you want to reveal your quirk first?" "Mostly for Hatsum-san's sake, since everyone else here knows it already." "Alright," he nodded. His body was tense with hesitation, but he eventually spoke. "So my quirk is mind control. I can target one person at a time and paralyze them after they respond to my voice. The duration is random, and sometimes they can break free out of my quirk if their willpower is strong enough. Guess these must be the so-called restrictions Shinso warned me about earlier." Hatsum seemed unfazed. "That's a pretty useful quirk. I can see why you would make a good rider." Shinso relaxed at her response. "If we're done with introductions," I interrupted, "we still need a plan for how we'll win." "Why, Shinso snapped out of it and began to address the three of us. "Alright, so I think I have an idea. If you guys are willing to trust me, I think we can take a spot to the next round." Hatsum smiled. "As long as I get to show off my babies, then I'm good." I approve of us showing off," Blondie nodded. "So, what is your plan?" Shinso began to explain, and I started to pay attention. Thus far, Shinso seemed to at least have an idea what he was doing, going by his earlier move of uniting the general and support departments. If he already had a plan in mind, then it was probably going to be a good plan. "We're going to go after the representative, Katsuki Bakugo." "Shinso, you absolute moron." "Shinso, I'm not saying I hate you or anything. But if you were currently on life support, I'd unplug it to charge my phone. Pretty sure a new law recently passed so that hospitals would have several wall charging stations throughout the healthcare system to improve patient and visitor experience." "Not exactly relevant right now, Hatsum," Shinso muttered. "And I don't see why you're complaining, Hatsu. You're not the one who has to insult the guy. Seriously, I can't be the only one who has doubts about this plan." Blondie, or rather Aoyama, spoke up. "I think the plan is great." "Meh," Hatsum followed up. "As long as we stand out, I don't care how we do things." Shinso shrugged. "Well then, it looks like everyone but you agrees with the plan." "This is why I hate democracy," I grumbled. "For unpopular opinions, democracy is just 3 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. Just stick to the plan." "The plan is terrible." "Then here's a better one," Shinso said. "We win, they lose. Simple enough?" "All right, Reagan ***." Shinsu's face looked as if he was a hero of justice about to face off against the demon lord. In contrast, Hatsum was acting like a kid high on caffeine. Aoyama was posing with sparkles surrounding him. In contrast, my face showed a clear lack of motivation compared to the rest of my team. I really got myself involved in something troublesome, haven't I? The field, with its irregular ground and large surface area, was filled with multiple teams all getting ready for the event to start. From the looks of it, there were about a dozen teams total including ours. Other students were taking glances at us, and I could only assume it was because we were one of the few teams that consisted solely of non-hero department students. No doubt they would be going after us after the stunt we pulled earlier. In the end, all we managed to accomplish was to draw unnecessary attention towards our team, which I thought was somewhat unfair, since it was mostly Shinso's fault that riled up the other departments into a frenzy. Now that I think about it, why exactly did I go along with him in the first place? All of my hardships and suffering. If we trace it back to the source, the main cause was Shinso, right? As if sensing my thoughts, the purple-haired boy in question stared at me in confusion. Why are you staring at me like that? I'm just trying to see if I can vaporize you with my gaze alone. Stare. Shinso just rolled his eyes. All right, have you formed your teams yet? Present Mike called out. Well, you better have, because we're about to start soon. Let's start the countdown to this vicious clash. 3, 2, 1. Midnight cracked her whip against the floor. Begin. As expected, everyone immediately headed towards where Midoriya and his team were. Their teams all began to converge on his position. But a second later, a sudden gust of wind appeared. Warning bells rang in my mind. Wait, everyone stop. Get back. Warning them in time, our team barely avoided the sudden whirlwind that erupted in front of us. As they attacked indiscriminately, the wind managed to sweep away several teams with the shockwaves, throwing up dust and dirt in the process. The large atmospheric swirl of destruction attacked anything within a radius of a few dozen meters, forcing them to back away in safety. Whoa folks! It looks like Inasa Yorashi of Class 1B has pulled out the big guns to surround the top-ranking teams with a wind wall. That's a tricky obstacle for those stuck outside. All of us stared in shock. Shit. Shinso summed up our feelings with that one word. Well, that's a problem. No kidding, since the team we were going after was stuck on the other side of this wall. It was difficult to estimate, but the speed of wind must have been flying over 100 meters per second. At that speed, it was easy enough for the wind to pick up humans with little regard for their weight. The only reason bodies weren't flying everywhere was the fact that it seemed to be concentrated to only push them away if they approached instead of attacking them. Seriously, where did somebody with a quirk like that come from? Normally, a quirk this flashy would have drawn a ton of attention in the first event. Unless, they were holding back so that they wouldn't draw any attention. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that. Damn it, it made sense. After all, the first 2 rounds of the festival didn't matter in terms of winning, but rather, weeding out the total number of participants among the student body. Thus, it would be better to conserve your abilities until they were truly needed, such as in the current situation. Still, knowing all of that wasn't helpful for them at that moment. As long as the person with the quirk to manipulate the wind kept this up, there was nothing else we could do to get past it. None of us had wind or flying quirks that could help deal with the situation. Hatsum, can your hover sols guide all of us if we throw our team into the wind? Wait, hold on a second. Shinso turned to face me. You want us to jump into that spiral of wind? I nodded. It may seem like they're just outputting a lot of wind, but if you pay attention, you can see that they are making sure to control the airstream so that anything caught in the air will hover before being pushed away by a slight current. If we charge fast enough, we can temporarily overcome that knockback force and fly past that barrier. My teammates silently glanced at each other. I can use my quirk to cut us an opening to bleed off the worst of it, Aoyama said. Hatsum followed up after his words. It might strain my baby, but as long as you all hold on to me, my boots should steer us while we float. It's a crazy plan, Shinso smirked. But then again, only crazy plans will let us win at this point. There was nothing left to say after that. Charging forward as a group, a beam of light shot out of Aoyama's navel as it pierced through the wind barrier. The hole caused by the attack shifted the surrounding winds into chaos for a moment, and that was when we took advantage of it. Exploiting the gap, our bodies were battered by countless wind streams before we felt our feet lift off the ground. Shinso pressed a button, and the jetpack Hatsum gave him earlier activated. At the same time, Hatsum activated her hoversols to speed us through before the gap could close up again. Seconds later, we crashed to the ground as we made it past the wind barrier. The scene before us was chaotic, the landscape broken and scarred like the battlefield of some action movie. There were 4 teams here. Team Midoriya, consisting of Midoriya, his friend Uraraka, and a bespectacled Tenya. Team Bakugo, Explodey Face himself, red-haired Kirishima, and 2 other classmates from Class 1A that I forgot the names of. Team Todoroki, the fellow half-toned hair guy, the girl with the creation quirk, the guy with a shadow bird, and the human taser. Team Monoma. Blondie himself was the rider with 3 other teammates that I assumed were from Class 1B. By process of elimination, the person with the wind quirk had to be someone from Shinso, Rima, Hatsum. Target the team from Class 1B. Alright, you got it. All of them answered at the same time before we moved to act. The space between us and them was a little over a few steps, and we shortened this small distance in an instant. Their group noticed us immediately as we neared, and that was when we attacked. Was Monoma who spoke first. What if? From Aoyama, another burst of light shot towards them, only to be blocked by some kind of strange transparent wall. The attack shattered the barrier but lost strength in doing so before dispersing. While that happened, Hatsum shot 2 metal cables towards the rider, Monoma. Yet, a strange gust picked up and caused the lines of wire to miss at the very last second. And lastly, Shinso spoke up. How does it feel to get shown up by us regular students? Huh? How do you... Whatever he was about to say, Monoma stopped speaking as Shinso's quirk took hold of him, grabbing at his band while we dashed past them. Shinso smirked as we retreated while the other team was busy trying to snap Monoma out of it. Quick, we still need to target the one with the wind quirk. I'm on it. Shinso raised his voice. Hey, I'm not a proctologist, but I know an asshole when I see one. You sure you horses are fine with supporting that ass on your shoulders? You guys? The well-built young man with a buzz cut yelled. Come back here and F. Again, Shinso's quirk took hold. We must have been lucky because after it did so, the wind barrier surrounding us immediately went down. Guys, look. The wind died down, now's our chance. Get them. While the others caused chaos, our group moved to clear the area so that we could spectate the fight. We managed to get a headband, but their points aren't worth that much, Shinso spoke to the rest of us. Meaning we'll have to stick with our original plan of going after Bakugo. We should act near the time limit, I added. So he won't have any opportunity to retaliate? His team is strong though, Hatsum noted. If we get too close, we might get chased and overwhelmed. I'm not sure if we can get away from them in time. So we need to disable them all at once, Aoyama concluded. An idea came to me. Hatsum, can your cables tangle them up and distract them? As long as I detach my wires after I shoot them. Great. Aoyama, can you distract Bakugo while Hatsum attacks? Yes, I'll make sure he won't pay attention to anyone else but me. Then I'll disable him once his team is trapped, Shinso said. Let's move. Directing our formation to charge towards them, Hatsum shot out her cables once we were only a few meters away from them. At the same time, Aoyama shot another beam towards Bakugo. Eyes widening, Bakugo shot out an explosion from his palms to direct the beam of light away from him. But because he was busy blocking the attack, Hatsum's move managed to successfully capture the rest of his team. Bound up and tangled, their flailing limbs only worsened their situation as they tried to free themselves. Shinso met Bakugo's eyes and smirked. Well, will you look at that? Didn't you say you were going to take first place before? Well, you've certainly placed first in terms of losing at the very least. His expression was murderous. You damn extra. Bakugo began to yell furiously. Who are you to stop me, the person destined to be the #1 hero? And after saying that, his expression glazed over as Shinso's quirk overtook Bakugo. Swiping one of the headbands off his head, Shinso smirked. Hitoshi Shinso, Gen Ed student? The whistle finally blew, signaling that the event was over.